All right, guys, we are live and our microphones are on, so we can't talk about people bad anymore. Now, what
We
I'm
would.
gonna do is we'll wait. We did go on early because why not? We're ready to rock here, and I'm gonna wait till people in the chat say that audio and everything is good. Basically, we'll
Sounds good.
see. We'll see how it goes.
Sounds good. This is gonna be a lot of fun.
Yep, audio is good. Got audio here. What else have we got? Audio is good. Okay. People have audio. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have Robert Young. Are you the owner operator of Force
I am.
Performance?
I am.
Creator
I
of? Founder?
creator, originator.
Wow.
I mean,
Okay.
I used to have a partner, friend that passed away years and years ago, but that was like prior to '99. But since '99, all on it's just been me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Always wear
Robert.
your 5 point harness when you're torquing around,
Oh, is
guys.
that what happened?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Sad to hear. Well, Robert makes turbochargers.
I do.
And Robert has outstanding knowledge of turbochargers. And we have, so since we're live, we're going to try to answer some live questions. But what we have is people ask questions ahead of time. And Robert, I sent most of them to him, and he's going to go over ones that will probably best explain things that, he sees the most.
A lot of really good questions on the YouTube channel and on the Facebook posts for this. And, the as far as where to start, we had to start somewhere, right? We won't start in the most perfect place, but you know, uh, I think a great place to start is where is to talk about back pressure. Okay, in turbochargers, it's as I read car forums, Chevrolet LS forums and whatnot. There's a lot of people that talk about back pressure and oh, you can't do that. It's too much back pressure. A lot of people say that they don't even measure it. But they say, oh, it's not working because it's got a lot of back pressure. A lot of times, that's true. But a lot of times it's hard to figure out too, because having a compressor wheel that is at uh, really near its maximum speed line, right near its, kind of in the 2,000 feet per second tip speed range, can make you think you got a lot of back pressure. But I've had plenty of cases where I got a large turbine and a larger turbine than a compressor, and symptoms might be that it's got a lot of back pressure, but the data really shows that it doesn't. What you're doing is you just kind of actually drank all the air out of the compressor, so to speak. A lot of the questions that I saw in the YouTube comments had to do with how do I know when I'm out of turbo? When you're out of turbo, it stops making power. How do I know if it's the compressor side or the turbine side? You probably run into that a lot where you start turning something up and clearly it stopped making power at some point. You go from 10 pounds to 12 pounds to 15 pounds to 17 pounds to 20, 22, 25 pounds. Somewhere in there, it stopped making power. Every one of those jumps, it makes a solid, discrete chunk more power. Raise it again, you get that same chunk. You raise it again, you get almost that whole chunk. You raise it again, you get there's a little bit less of that chunk. So it's stopping. It's not giving you any more, but you might not know why, and you might say, "Oh, it's got a lot of back pressure," but you also might have used up all your compressor. And I've run into this in some cases where I use some really large turbines, and had people think, well, I think I still even need a larger turbine. And we look at the data, and it's like, no, man, you're like actually 1 psi less back pressure
That's
than what
interesting. I didn't
you
know.
know.
I actually
Uh,
didn't know that you could run out of a compressor like that. I
yeah,
always thought turbine was the answer.
uh, a turbine has a lot to do with it, and it's the culprit, especially when you start thinking about how big some of our engines get in the Chevrolet world. Some of these guys are 400 inches and larger motors, so you definitely need a lot of turbine. But the turbine's not always the devil. Like sometimes you have an 80 millimeter compressor, and if you've got an 80 millimeter inducer on your compressor, 80 millimeter turbo, But if you're running it in a T4 housing with like an 87 by 70 something millimeter turbine wheel in it, you can't drink all that air out of that compressor. It's a 5-gallon bucket, but you can't carry 5 gallons in it because the turbine, so to speak. Yeah, if you look at the compressor map for it, it says it should flow 115 pounds a minute. You look at 115 pounds a minute on a compressor map and you think, okay, great, that should give me over 1,000 horsepower capacity with that many pound minute of flow available. That's the capacity of it. But if you couple a large compressor with a small turbine, a lot of times you can't get all of that compressor out of it. And the converse is true, which is what I started talking about. Big turbine, small compressor is a great way to keep the EMAP really low through the whole power band, make the best VE on the motor through the whole power band. But you got to make sure you don't run out of compressor at the same time. And that's where TurboTax come in, because you want to know what the speed is. Because if you look at a compressor map, as you start getting to the right-hand side of the compressor map, the x-axis being mass flow or CFM, depending on the units on the map, that's how much air, and the y-axis is your boost pressure. So if you look at the far right-hand side of your compressor map, you're seeing what the very last bit of the flow looks like. And typically you start seeing it go from 65% to 60 to 55% of compressor efficiency. That takes a lot of extra turbine work to do that. So operating your compressor right near the max speed line, that's when you need the most amount of turbine work possible. So that's why the two things get confused sometimes. Oh, I got a lot of back pressure, but I might also be at a compressor wheel. I might be doing both the things at the same time, or I might not be. I had a friend of mine sending me some data logs just day before yesterday. And he was saying, hey, what do we need to do? Do I need to go bigger than this? We're looking at the logs, and 29 pounds of boost, 29.2 pounds of boost, 29.4, 29.6 pounds of EMAP. But he's only getting 22 pounds of boost at the intake manifold. So he was looking at it, he was like, well, I got 22 pounds of boost, but I got almost 30 pounds of back pressure. This turbo, I need to change the turbo. And I was like, you know what you did here? You did yourself a big favor, because you have one more pressure sensor in there that you weren't even looking at. Go look at the pre-intercooler pressure sensor there. That's 29. That's 29. The turbo thinks it's making 29. The turbo is making 29. It's got 29 pounds of boost at the compressor outlet, at 29 pounds of drive pressure at the turbine inlet. The turbo is still in its free free deal.
So it's all intercooler drop.
That was 7 pounds of intercooler drop there. And he was like, hey, what do I need to do? I need to get freaky with this turbo. I need to, I need more. I said, what you need more of is another intercooler.
Yeah.
Not the turbo. You fix this intercooler, you get that pressure drop on that intercooler down to like 2 PSI. You just got 5 free pounds of boost pressure that you're already paying for.
If you're already making 20 horsepower per pound and you're losing 5 pounds, it's 100 to the tire probably.
Exactly. Don't leave that on the table. Don't leave that on the table.
I actually...
Well, you want to look at the data log.
It's one of those funny things where the more you don't know.
Yes.
And it's one of those things now where I want to put like a dominator on everything and have like a temperature map sensor on the turbo outlet and a temperature map on both sides of the end tanks on the, like everywhere, so I can see the delta everywhere. Because I've even
fast temperature sensors too, not like GM ones that would go in a cyclone intake manifold,
Yeah.
But a fast thermocouple that you could really know instantly that what that temp is doing.
I'm really interested to see. I have a fast one from Low Dollar, and I would love to see that. And I've seen people post about those where they show. I think Real Street Performance showed, and some other people showed the difference between. The one we're used to, where the temperature keeps rising and falls off, and then the fast one, how totally different the curves are in the inlet air temperature. So that interests me also. The one showed like 60 more degrees than the other one. It was way too slow to.
And what if you're using that air temperature to do something like decide how much ignition trim you're going to let?
Something important, like everybody does, IET versus spark. Yeah, they were saying like you can have a 60-degree delta that you'll never see.
You didn't know it was hot air, and you thought it was cool air, so you let it have 2 more degrees of timing.
That can be bad.
It could be. Some days.
I would say most people, even me, 2 to 1 is where most quit. I would say they're trying way too hard at 2 to 1.
Okay, I'd like to talk about that because a lot of cars you want to set up to run 2 to 1.
Yeah.
Okay, the stock converter car, you know,
Okay.
that is going to lock up quick. You need it to spool quickly because the converter already connected everything at 3,500 RPM, 3,000 RPM, maybe even 2,500 RPM. So in a case like that, 2 to 1's okay because what you're really wanting is some mid range. You're really wanting some, you know, some burnout capability with the ice cream trip, you know.
Yes.
And so something like that, it doesn't really matter if it's 2 to 1 at 7,000 RPM. You're going to hold it, you know, you're going to be trying to pedal it at 5,000 while you're doing burnouts. You know, you want it to be responsive a lot of times if you're going to just drive it around a lot. It depends on what your gearing and your converter is like, right? You know.
So is that one of those things where if a car is quitting around that, it's just inefficient compressor or something else?
You mean if we like say you got like a 78, 75 turbo with like a 96 housing and it's going 2 to 1 on a 6 liter?
Yeah, and it goes from 25 horsepower per pound to 10.
That's your EMAP backing up completely because the 78 millimeter compressor ought to probably flow about 100 pounds a minute. So if you were to look at it from a capacity perspective, that has a capacity for 1,000 horsepower. Okay. Yeah. And like for example, I got a 7582 on my Tahoe. So it's a 75 millimeter compressor, but it's got a very large turbine in it. Okay. And it carries out, it doesn't build EMAP. It carries its power to Redline. I don't know if you remember seeing the dyno graph of that.
Yeah.
We and Dyno did a few weeks ago.
It made
but
power
it was just,
until you lifted.
It looked like a blower. It made power until I got up there and started floating the valves. That's another story we talk about later. But so if you put enough turbine on it, you can use all the compressor. Is kind of a good rule of thumb. If you've got enough turbine on it, you can use all the compressor. Now you go, well, if I put a really big turbine on it, it's going to be awful lazy. Well, typically, if you're going to go bigger with the turbine, you don't also go bigger with the AR. You know, so like in a case on a S400, if you were going to run like my bigger 99 by 92 millimeter turbine wheel in that, most guys would want to run the 132 on that, even though I make a 158 for it.
Oh, wow.
But most guys don't have a 450-inch motor. So if you were going to run a single run that turbine on a bigger engine, you would want to run the 158 AR, you know. There's a lot going on in a V8 that's different than a 4-cylinder. Of course, my background is heavy in the 4-cylinders. We got 2 exhaust valves. You know, we've got almost the whole chamber opens up. Half the chamber opens up and lets the exhaust out. It's a lot different than having a single exhaust valve like on a 427, and you got to let it all get out of that. And unfortunately, since you have to have so much more duration because you've got one valve, that lets the exhaust manifold pressure have more of an effect on that flow through that port. That's why you end up with so many turbo cams that kind of go short on the duration. They go, you know, hey, let me, you know, I'm gonna fix this 2 to 1 kind of turbo by limiting how much exhaust duration I have, limiting the overlap, limiting how much of a negative effect that EMAP can have on my tune-up.
I was gonna also say, maybe introduce how you got introduced to sloppy mechanics, or why you're interested in doing the show, or what you've done. Like we talked about when we did the test, you know, how have you applied stuff that you've learned on or seen on sloppy mechanics?
Well, how I started with the whole even getting interested in sloppy mechanics is kind of an interesting story because I've had a 2002 Chevy Tahoe that I've probably tried to trade in about half dozen times over my life. And every time I go to trade it in, they're like, yeah, we'll give you $2,000 for it. You know, oh, we give you, $2,500. So I just kept it, you know, because why would I give away a perfectly good Tahoe that I bought brand new and did religious transmission fluid changes on it, blah, blah, blah. But so I had this truck and I'm like, I want to do something cool with it, you know? And I thought, you know, I'm going to turbo it. I'm going to turbo it. I see what these guys are doing with the Chevrolets. It's going to be a blast. Okay. Cause I watch you guys and you make it look really easy, dude. You know, your videos and your step-by-step process, your tune library and everything.
You're like, what's the gimmick? This seems too easy and fun.
That's really what it was. Okay. And I was like, it can't be that easy. There's no way it can be that easy. These guys are glossing over stuff, you know, and so I started off, you know, well, I'm gonna kind of take the spirit of sloppy mechanics, but I'm going to I'm going to add a little of my own flair to it. So instead of just using a real basic camshaft, I get a little fancy on the camshaft, and I got real short duration, high lift camshaft, and I end up trying to run pack 1218s with it, and I didn't have them shimmed up tight enough. And around 6,200 RPM or something, I started getting, my dynograph comes up real nice, and around 6,000 RPM, whoa, just these large oscillations in it, and it's nothing's happening other than the valves are not opening and closing like they were when I had lower boost. I turn the boost up and it starts floating valves. So I not following the recipe got me into trouble there. I should have put just a simple camshaft in it. I tried to get fancy because I'm an air-cooled Volkswagen guy. I'm a DSM guy. I've always got fancy with camshafts. It's just part of what I have to do, right? It's you think you have to do all of these things. You think everything's got to be just exactly perfect. And when you're import world, it really does, to be honest with you. Or you're not going to get very far with your project. You're going to blow up. You're not going to have a good time if you don't pay really close attention to all the details. So coming from that end of the spectrum where we never blow the car up, like the last thing we're going to do is risk blowing anything up. It's just too expensive. You got too much money in these crazy Mitsubishi parts that are not commonly available, right? So you come over to Chevrolet and you come over to the sloppy mantra method of doing this.
And everything's impact guns and just whatever. And
it's like, oh my God,
it's dirty and reuse it and no one cares. And it's fine.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I get it. There's a raccoon. Okay. But like, when do we do it right? But then I see your dyno stuff and your 8x8s, Mustang project, I'm like, wow, you really did avoid all the high priced things that normally stop people from doing these projects. But you still accomplished your goal, and not only that, but you made a whole recipe for other people to read about how to follow along and how to do it, like with, you call them don't BS me.
Yep. That was, I created that in like 2014 because what I learned was people don't really know what they want. And what I also learned was that 500 rear wheel mark is where the expenses go way up. But to make 500 wheel is extremely easy. And even if the combination of some of the parts are bad, it'll still probably make 500 wheel.
I find myself saying that 500 times a year as I'm talking about my Tahoe. One of the guys in the shop, we wouldn't do that on a Lamborghini. We wouldn't do that with a GTR. You wouldn't do that with a Mitsubishi. I'm like, man, let me tell you, if I've learned anything about these GMs, is that you can have 6 things not optimized and you still go make your 650 horsepower.
Yeah.
Every little component in it does not need to be fully optimized in order for this project to work really well. Okay. I mean, think about it. You got single turbo, all the exhaust has to come around, log manifolds. None of this stuff's optimized, right? But it works great. You can make a 4,000 pound truck run a 10-second quarter mile.
So that's like, what you started doing was just do some garbage to the Tahoe and hang one of your turbos on it. And you're like, oh, wow, this is fun.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And at first I was like, well, and I caught a lot of flack for even trying to learn how to use HP tuners instead of put a Motec on it, And I'm like, no, this is the way you do it. Well, why do we have to do it that way? I said, just put another AEM data logger box on it so we can collect data. I'm going to run it with the HP tuner. I want to do the same thing that all these other guys are doing. I want the experience that they're having.
Since it works.
Since it works. I want to see it. I want to see it for myself. And man, I couldn't believe how right you were about so much of the working, of it. I had a few pitfalls. Like I told you, I tried to get fancy with camshafts. I made the mistake the first time, then I made the mistake second time. I put another fancy camshaft in there and I thought, well, I'm not gonna have any problems. I'll put a BTR 660 spring kit in it. I didn't shim them tight enough for what I was doing. I didn't have a 660 lift cam. I had a 630 lift cam. I didn't have them shimmed the right way. I didn't have them shimmed 50, 60 from coil bind. So even when I went back, the dyno we were talking about a minute ago, 770 or whatever, dyno on that car with the 7582 on it, I had to stop at 7,000 or so because I started losing the valve train tracking at the very top and it started to get Mickey Mouse again.
And it's funny how like a $240 camshaft with $130 springs with no shimming, no double checking, and nothing else, with a truck intake is making 500 to 600 rear wheel even on pump.
And then I try to do all these extra special things because I want to show how special I am, and I have problems, and I end up making 75 more horsepower.
Well, that's what I've learned is people really squeeze, and the gain is just not there, or if you're building a budget, totally not worth it.
But go back to your 2-to-1, 1-to-1 map, the EMAP ratio. 2-to-1's great on a lot of cars. If you're going to street drive it, if you're going to spend time in the car, you're going to like the throttle response of a car that ends up having a 2-to-1 exhaust to intake manifold pressure. And it's not, you can put cams in there that work with it, like the SS2 cam works great with that. It's not a super sensitive to EMAP camshaft. You get up there around 240, 250 duration at 50. Now you got to be real careful about your EMAP.
Yep.
Okay, because now you're like, actually, this is all like set up for race cars. At that level, it's you're putting cam in there that you would put in a 7,500 RPM NA car, almost. Yeah. And there's a joke they say about camshafts is like the best turbo cam is an NA cam. A lot of times if you've got the right turbo.
Yeah, like Holdener and I always say every cam's a turbo cam. Like we joke, but it's somewhat true.
And there's a lot of truth to it. Now, you could get camshafts that help you more with a high back pressure combo. There's definitely cams you would want to use. You want to use something with a little less duration if you were planning on having a lot of back pressure. If you knew you were gonna run a 78, 75, if you knew you were gonna run the 81 AR, if you knew you had a 4.8, you're gonna run the smallest turbo setup on that. You're going to have high back pressure. You wouldn't overcam that. You would make sure the exhaust cam was not really heavy on the duration. And SS2 is what on the duration at 50? I forget off the top of my head. 230 or something?
It's a 228, 230.
Something?
228 intake, 230 exhaust, 112 LSA, and it's right in the mid, like a 550 lift, 550, 575.
Here's another point. A lot of people are looking, well, that's not very much lift. I need to run a cam with a lot of lift. That's what I was telling.
Doesn't really need lift when it's getting smashed in there, in my opinion.
And then I went and flowed my heads. Okay. So once this is let's see, where is 550, 500's right here. Look what happens to the intake port when you get to 500. It's pretty flat after that. It's pretty flat after that.
That's funny that you did that, because you're like an airflow guy, and I have never done or seen that. 298, 504, and 512. Oh no, 300. 298, 304, and 312. Yeah, it's completely done at.
So it's done. It's not doing anything else past that 500.
But that's what we saw with like expensive double springs and shimming them and putting a larger lift cam.
You told everybody that. You told me that. I read it. I didn't do it. But then I went and saw that you were right.
Yeah. I know on like an all motor aspect, a lot of stuff counts on you, the sum of all parts doing everything correctly. But as far as I saw, you just slam bang and it's going to do whatever it's going to do if you don't have some other issues.
And that is really what you're going to do on a phase one project. I think, if it's your first time you're putting one of these together, that's the kind of project you're going to do.
Change once you want to do that. Yeah, once you get acclimated and you know what you want to change, you're going to change it anyway. So that's why I'm like, just get it running. I say it, and then Freiberger says like it doesn't need to be right; it needs to be running.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a funny joke where we talk about how many years people have had their project because they're trying to do it right.
That's why people think I'm being mean, but I'm like,
you're trying to help them. You're not trying to be mean and tease them. You're trying to point out to them, you want to just finish it right now?
Yeah.
Let's just finish it right now.
Just have it make noise. And like I always say to people, get the swap done and running and the car moves. Mm-hmm. It's a huge motivation. And then like a camshaft and springs is
you can do that next winter. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
do that.
later, get the car running, go race it, go 15s. Who gives a, who
Yeah,
gives?
yeah, yeah. And like maybe put a cam in it this summer or something,
Who are you
whatever.
trying to impress? Guys with pro mods? Those guys aren't having fun. Trust
They're
me.
not watching you.
They're
You know?
they aren't having fun. Trust me.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's stressful. That's what, and this is not stressful. You know, these cars are not stressful. I don't get, like, even when I was dynoing a few weeks ago, we did the 770 on my Boosto, 12, 13 pounds of boost. And it started floating valves at the very top, not tracking very good. And the next thing you know, it's like tick, 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 just loud, just like you have a hammer, you know? And I wasn't upset. It was the first time that I thought I'd ever heard a motor, and I wasn't like, oh man, God, the money of this, you
Yeah,
know?
that's why I say to people like the $200 motor. And my favorite comments were for many years, I was finding ways to make 100 extra horsepower safely per year. And that has like kept going. And I'm like, how long can that business model keep happening? But it keeps happening. And people are always like, in the comments, they'd be like, why don't you just stop being an idiot and build a motor? And I'm like, well, a $200 mistake is going to be a $5,000 mistake. I don't think you're
Yeah,
getting it. And they're
yeah,
like, well, that's
yeah.
dumb. And I'm like, trust me, I know people that are spending 10,000 on a short block and hammering the bearings out of it and ruining the motor because they didn't understand how to not fold a rod on a $200 engine. All of it
You might
carries
as well.
over.
Yes, yes, and all the knowledge carries over, all the experience of it completely carries over, and that's what I love about your whole movement here. And you have created a movement. I think you've single handedly created a movement here. You know, there are droves of dudes out there that follow your recipe and go to the drag strip and show everybody. You know,
Yeah, I'm surprised. Like, even if people would say that it's made up or handpicked or something else, I've seen way too many people do it without asking any questions and then do their, like, I would say one a month is extremely positive, where they're like, I just did carburetors, my stuff never went that fast, or it was completely stripped out, race car, earplugs, couldn't drive it to the track, went 12s, and now they're like, I have this bullshit car that foot brakes a 1050 on pump, and I drive it and it's quiet and it has like a
it's
fairly smooth
success.
cam. Yeah.
That's winning, man. You know, and you know what else? You could put air conditioning in that if you wanted to. You know,
Yeah. A lot of
you
them,
know.
especially what, like you said, I knew right away that you were having way too much fun with your sloppy combo when you started doing like 1,000 foot burnouts in your Tahoe. I was like, there it is. I don't care. I'm going to fry my tires off. No
Yeah,
cares in the world.
yeah, yeah. Well, they were hand cooked Dynapros. That's what they're for. You know, they ought to make a burnout master or something. I would buy those if I could find that was like burnout master. You know,
That'd be
we
nice
need
if they made a tire that was like hard soap and just called Burnout
to.
Master. Yeah. Maybe I can push for that. I'll go hit up
Well, who's
Toya.
listening to us? Maybe they'll make a tire.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit up some tire people after this. All right.
We
Well,
need some 900 treadwear tires.
what was another question that you thought was good to go over for
Okay,
everybody?
well, another one was like this was from S14 Sean from YouTube. Do you find that most turbine and compressor combo perform best when the wheel mass or size is similar on the hot and cold side? For example, a 62
Oh,
works
like
better
a
than
50-50.
a
Someone else was
67.
asking
Dude.
about 50-50 cam. He keeps asking.
Mhm. Yeah, so why are they not the same on each side? But different answers for cams and turbos. But personally, I prefer to have the turbine just a little bit higher flow than our compressor. Um, even in cases where we want a fast spooling turbo, I'll just have to make everything a little bit smaller. Like my fastest spooling turbo for single turbo on the LS is a 72 millimeter compressor with a 75 millimeter turbine. So kind of a small compressor, but I mean, we made 600 horsepower with that on the Boosto last year when we were kind of testing things out and doing a little development work on it. And I was realized that that's a great place to start for a lot of people because it's so responsive. And if you and in my case, I put a 96 AR on it, that's still really responsive with a 96 AR, by a 6 liter though. And it just so much instant torque. And I was able to run that with the 4L80 first gear. And before I changed the rear axle ratio, I had a 373. Okay, so that really tall 4L80 first gear and my 373 and a stock truck converter. Okay, that was all I had. So I come up to about 2,300 RPM, and it couldn't go any further. It couldn't push through that. You had to pull through that with the motor, but the turbo was already there. See, a nice little lightweight 72 millimeter compressor with a good flowing 75 millimeter turbine on a 96 AR on a 6 liter, really responsive. I mean, talk about a burnout machine. It burns out now, but it would burn out even harder then from a lower RPM.
Having that like blower power band is really nice. That's one of the reasons why I suggest like the VS billet. They don't sell it anymore. The Gen 1 billet 7875. Because of how broad your power band can be, how much it works on the different size engines, and then on the pump gas aspect, where if everything's horrible and you make like 450, 500, or if you have E85 and you did well on everything, it'll go 820 wheel is not hard for it to do. And that range with pretty fast spooling and everything else is incredible.
It's fast spooling and it makes a lot of EMAP, but if you don't overcam it, it doesn't even cause a problem. Okay. You don't put too much exhaust cam in it, and that EMAP's not even a problem. Man.
It won't crush that 75 millimeter.
But now another thing I like about, pardon?
Everyone wants the chop.
Though. Oh yeah, just a little chop. Yeah, well, just make it just wreck the tune-up at idle.
That's what I've said to people too. Like, just destroy the air-fuel ratio at idle.
Yeah, just take the fuel way off at idle.
It'll sound like a blower car, old school blower car. People love that. I'm like, all the air fuel is 919. That's what gets you. So whenever I hear that, I'm like, fix the car, man.
I hate it, but it sounds great. I love it, man. It's like, that's not your cam. It's just running.
It's a thing, yeah. I mean,
you're killing your plugs, dude.
Even that guy that works for Holly, is his name Tim? He built that Fairmont with like the giant blower, and he set up a switch to run normally, and it idles beautifully normal. And then he hooked up a switch where, because all those guys grew up where like the blower just like
you've got to just idle through the parking lot, right?
Yeah, just like stabbing through the converter on the brakes all day. And people are like, wow. And I'm just like, your tune-up sucks. Like, I can't unknow that. Just like,
okay, so back to that sizing question. Okay. So that was that's a 72 millimeter with a 75 millimeter turbine. I always talk about the inducer diameter on the compressor wheel. That's the inlet side on the compressor wheel, and the exducer diameter on the turbine wheel, because that's the exit side of the turbine wheel.
The smallest ones.
Those are the two places that all the air has to go through. So talking about the larger diameter on the turbine wheel is kind of irrelevant unless you happen to also know what the smaller diameter is, just because you're real familiar with all the part numbers.
That's why when someone says to me like what size their turbo is and they say GTX whatever, and I'm like, what are the wheel sizes?
How about some millimeters? There's some sizes at
like when Patrick was here with the RS3, and he was like, it was one of your turbos, but it was a crazy model name, and he's like, it's this model name. And I texted you, and I'm like, what the hell is this? And you're like, oh, it's a 6772. I'm like, oh, that makes sense to my dumb brain.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times people ask me like, well, tell me a little bit about that turbo. I was like, you want to know like the Turbinetics equivalent name of it, in millimeter or something?
Yeah, they want like the dyno jet number or the mainline number or the Mustang dyno number.
So in 72, 75s, I like that. You don't get a lot of back pressure with that. Okay. You get a lot of nice, you get, in my mind, you get the best combination of good response and not too much back pressure on the top end when you cant it with a little bit bigger turbine wheel than compressor wheel. Okay. Now what's the flip side of that? That's the 78, 75s. Okay. And there's a lot of 78, 75s, right? But they're all inherently the same in that those are the dimensions. Okay. So it's a 78 millimeter inducer for the compressor wheel and a 75 millimeter exducer for the turbine wheel. So now we're kind of on the other side of the ratio, a little bit bigger compressor. You know what you do here? You can't drink all the air out of the compressor wheel anymore. But it's got a natural rev limiter in it. You see, since the compressor is bigger than the turbine, we can't really ever just drive the shaft speed to the moon. Okay. Because we can't, we just don't have enough torque. The turbine's smaller than the compressor. Okay. So those turbos are really hard to destroy, which makes them also another really good first turbo. Okay, because they'll come up and they'll have like a natural rev limiter to them. The turbo won't ever really spin fast enough that the compressor will just explode.
That's nice. Here's a good additive. Pip Van Winkle says, when discussing how fast the turbo spools, say at the strip, how do you define fast? Like less than 5 seconds or instantly? And I would say that completely depends on the combination, but a lot of turbos with good transient are like under a second to full boost.
It's going to depend on the converter,
RPM and everything
gear,
else.
the
Yeah.
weight of the car, the rear axle ratio, and all those sorts of things. So we talk about spool at the strip. We don't ever spool at the strip. When we're spooling at the strip, the lights haven't even come down yet.
Yeah.
So spooling at the strip is kind of, you don't ever have to worry about that. What you have to worry about is like, I want to get on this expressway and I just want to stab it and I just want to have it rip up the expressway.
Yeah.
I don't want to stab it and go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3.
Yeah, it's a lot of dependencies there. Like that's why any decent question like that, there's 400 answers to it. Because
yes,
like you
and
said,
there's 400 good answers.
Does it have a trans brake? Are you foot braking? How high
What's
is your
the converter setup? What's the rear axle ratio
I think sometimes people they want to know what transient is. Like if there's somewhere the turbo lights off well and they put their foot to the floor on the highway, how fast can it go from 0 to 30?
Then here's a term I can add to the vernacular here. Okay, it's called boost threshold RPM. Okay, what RPM is it such that RPM, if I'm below it and I stab it, I have to wait, and if I'm above it, when I stab it, it's instant.
Right to wastegate.
Yeah, right to wastegate. So that's your threshold RPM. So that's what I like to look at, really. And that's why when I was doing my dyno pulls, and you were saying, well, you can lock the converter and start from 2200 RPM if you want, but it seems silly to me. I just like to do it in mile per hour and let the converter be in there and everything. But I wanted to dyno it with the converter locked from a lower RPM so that I could see where that threshold RPM was on my dyno graph, and with a lot of my turbos, I figured that out already, at least as it works on my 6-liter.
Yeah. Well, I hope that explains a bunch for people. But did you have another good topic you wanted to start on? There's so many good ones here. I must have 30 of them.
Did you see this guy's math involved in sizing a turbo? Did you see that one, Josh Tipton?
Yep. Yeah, I saw a bunch of.
We talked about back pressure, and really I talked about like don't forget about your intercooler pressure drop when you're looking at back pressure. Yeah. Okay, because you're gonna really want to look at when you're comparing boost pressure to back pressure. You want to look at what the turbo did, not what made it to the intercooler.
I had a friend recently where we measured compressor outlet and intake, obviously the map sensor, and it was he could only make 15 pounds, and we're like, what's going on? There's no leaks. They smoked it. It was John Martin, if he's listening or listens, but he was losing. It was 30 pounds at the compressor and 15 at the intake.
So you don't need a new turbo if that's what's going on.
No.
Yeah.
That was an easy one.
Well, the other part of Josh's Tipton's question was his math involved when sizing a turbo, and it is like for the first, I don't know, 25,000 times, and it can be anytime you want it to be. But one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight was because there was several questions about compressor maps. It's like, when I look at a compressor map, where do I put my eyes and what am I trying to see? So the first thing you do when you look at a compressor map, which was, hey, math involved in sizing a turbo, it all loops into that. Okay. So when you look at a compressor map, you want to look at the choke flow side of it. You want to come right down to the x-axis and see what the pound per minute flow rate of air was for that. You multiply that by 10, that's roughly the capacity of that turbocharger to make horsepower. So if it was 125 pounds per minute, there was the whole right-hand choke flow side of that compressor, then multiply that by 10, roughly 1,200 crankshaft horsepower.
What I'm familiar with too is like if it flows 780 pounds, it'll be 780 flywheel.
Yeah. If it flows 75 pounds a minute, you could see 75 flywheel horsepower without running out of anything, without having a problem.
That's what's like. I like looking at the Holley numbers. I like looking at the fuel flow number if everything else is correct, because what we have found out is on 70% alcohol pump E85, if it's flowing 900 pounds a minute of
90 pounds.
fuel, it's roughly 900 wheel is what we're finding out.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And if you got good injector data in your Dominator, you know, dead time compensation and all that, your fuel calcs for your AFR and your fuel delivered will tell you calculated airflow. You know, you'll see that even if you don't have a meter, you can get your computer to do that. I know the Dominator does it. I don't know about the rest of the line, but I know the Dominator on the top end of that line allows for fuel calcs like that.
Yeah, pretty much all of them use the same parameters where they show pounds a minute of fuel.
So that's like the first thing you want to look at on the compressor map is what is the pound per minute, the choke flow with the right-hand side of that map. I'll just draw a map up here on this board real quick. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So generically, a compressor map is going to have a surge line and then a bulge to it. And this is going to be boost. And this is going to be flow. If you're lucky, the units for the flow side are going to be in pounds per minute, and you won't have to do any conversions, okay? So if the units are in pounds per minute, and this side of the map right here comes down to 100 pounds per minute, then that's generally speaking, that's going to be a great turbo to use for up to about 1,000 crankshaft horsepower on a 2-valve motor. If you had a 4-valve motor, you might be able to get 1,000 wheel horsepower out of it, just because the efficiencies of the engines are a little different. The next thing you want to do is try to predict what boost pressure are you going to run this at. You know, if you think you're going to run it at 20 pounds of boost, figure out what the pressure ratio is for 20 pounds of boost. I'm not going to do math on this, okay? I told myself before we got started I wasn't going to do any math.
Not get too crazy.
So that's a second. We'll do another one later. So say that this pressure ratio right here corresponds to 20 psi. Okay, so this is where you're going to be operating. So this is really where you want to know the mass flow for. And you're gonna if your turbo spools up quickly, you're gonna come right up to this, hit the wastegate, and run all the way out to this choke flow. This is the part of the compressor map that you're interested in. You don't really care what happens up here at 65 pounds of boost pressure for a Chevrolet. Most Chevrolets are going to run 30 pounds of boost maximum. Very irregularly are you going to see Chevrolet LS engines that are running higher than 30 pounds of boost on. And especially if you're using, just the sloppy style of, the basic pistons and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's probably not crazy top end like Jack Roberts or what's the other guys? All those stock bottom end record guys that are swinging 8,000 plus RPM and everything.
They'll let the boost go up. Those guys won't run a boost curve like this. Those guys will run a boost curve. They'll 20, and then they'll let the boost rise as the RPM goes. Okay, and that'll help them get further into the meat of the compressor map. The compressor map's your capacity. It doesn't mean you're going to get that. It's like buying a 5-gallon fuel jug. It doesn't mean there's 5 gallons of fuel in it. It means you can fit 5 gallons of fuel in it. It's not a guarantee of like what the flow rate's going to be. It just tells you what the flow rate could be, the max flow rate could be.
I think this is a good question here, like a quick answer if you can. And you can just say that it's specific, but I agree with a bunch of this. It says, what are the advantages or disadvantages of doing 2 smaller twins versus 1 larger single if you have the same horsepower goal, specifically in V8 land? Is it a cost and complexity decision, or is there merit to having 2 smaller ones for like transient or overall power?
You're right there. There's a lot of merit to having 2 smaller ones for transient. Okay. And if you have the budget for it, it's not a bad idea. Okay.
Is it because it's spreading the turbine area more effectively?
You have to accelerate the turbine shafts. Okay. So if they're 2 smaller diameter compressors and 2 smaller diameter turbines, the inertia is lower than if it were 1 large.
Oh, that makes sense. There's less mass to swing.
Yeah. So I'm getting all of the compressor flow that I need because I have 2 slow inertia turbos that accelerated quickly rather than 1 large high inertia turbocharger that was a little more difficult to accelerate up to a high shaft speed. Here's an example of that. PowerStroke a few years ago, they made a turbo that had 2 compressor wheels on 1 shaft.
Oh, wow. That's weird.
Yeah, weird, huh? Okay, one compressor wheel faced forward like regular, and then on the back side of it, it was like a person with two heads. Okay, it had another compressor wheel
I'm
facing
gonna
back.
like look this up. That sounds weird as
Yeah,
hell.
it's like just like this.
Uh-oh, he's got one. He's got one,
No,
kids.
I don't have one sitting here, but it's like this on a shaft. Okay,
That's weird
and
as
then
hell.
and then the turbine was over here, and you had an inlet that came in and fed this one, an inlet that came in and fed this one, and both of them spit out into one volume. And so this let them run a lot of shaft speed and keep the inertia really low so that they could get the response the way they wanted to.
That's
okay.
I've never heard of that before.
It's the same thing that what your guy's asking about here. What about two small turbos? You know, why would you have two small turbos instead of one large one? Of course, there's packaging concerns, you know, of course, there's all that sort of thing. But from an engineering perspective, in a what do I get for my investment of doing it, you get lower inertia and faster transient shaft speeds.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I figured for a street car, some of those smaller twins were more effective. But what I used to say is, at least in my experience, a single will do what you want. And when you want to make a ton of power, you need two large of the whatever you would consider singles to carry
Not
over
a bad
top
idea.
of that.
Yeah, not
At
a bad
least in
idea.
a drag race experience of mine.
Mm-hmm. Also, yeah, there's along with the expense of doing two of them, you have those are smaller turbos. So, like I said, there's smaller wheels, there's smaller shafts, they're lighter weight, everything like that. They're also more delicate. Okay, so all of a sudden, instead of running an S400 that's got bearings in it the size of my fist.
Yeah, it's made of concrete and you can beat it up.
Yeah. S400, man, like you could beat on an S400 for a long time. I mean, the shaft diameter, the quill diameter in an S400 is 3/8 of an inch. Okay, that's the compressor wheel has a huge hole in it.
More forgiving.
You can beat them up. You can even not put a blow-off valve on them.
Oh, that's a good.
15 pounds
I'm glad you went there. It just triggered a memory. Someone asked, it'll be a good offshoot, blow-off valve, yes or no, depending on easy.
And if you're running a truck turbo like an S400,
doesn't care.
It won't care up to about 15 pounds. Okay, if you're going to run 35 pounds on it, and you didn't want to carry spare turbos with you all season long while you're racing, probably put a blow-off valve on it. It's going to last longer, because that is a big shock load to the turbo when the throttle shuts. I mean, you had 100 pounds
of airflow,
of air per minute. So it's going in. It's in a 3-inch tube, right? So I got a 100-pound slug in a 3-inch tube. And it's going at like, I don't know, Mach 1 or something, 500 miles an hour, 300 miles an hour this way. And all of a sudden, stop it. It's still it's air, but it's still 100 pounds.
That would be an interesting sensor that maybe a low-dollar Brandon can create, is like an air vane that tells us how fast the airspeed is. I don't think a mass air meter can measure
You just
speed.
calculate it. You can just calculate it.
Oh, okay. The flow versus everything else.
And the cross section of the tube. It's a simple math problem for a physics student. So yeah, it's fast. It's not Mach speed, but it's pretty fast. It's so fast that like you start to think, do I really want to make it take a 90-degree turn? It's going so fast. Do I really want to change the direction of it because it has inertia?
That's one thing I learned is eliminating 90s is a huge free horsepower gain. Do whatever you can to 45 instead of a 90. And especially if it's a 90 and a 90 and just give up. Like you're throwing away.
Yeah, and it's like, what if my friend that contacted me, he's like had 7 pounds of pressure drop from his intercooler. What if he calls up Ron Shear and buys like a wicked intercooler, right? And he puts it on and it goes from 7.5 pounds of pressure drop to 6.5 pounds of pressure drop.
Yeah.
Well, then it wasn't the intercooler, it was all the 90s. So you're going to go back and look at your couplers and the way your intercooler pipes are connected. Do you have a 3-inch to 2.5-inch coupler and you've got the 2.5-inch pipe shoved 3 inches into the coupler? What are you doing with the airflow in different places? Because you could just straight up make mistakes too with connecting those parts. Here's a little bit of a difference, like kind of a small automotive thrust bearing and a larger S400. So you can see how much larger the shaft is that goes through that. And the durability.
That's like 3 times at least.
Yeah, the durability is way different.
That's unreasonable.
It's like a 35R turbine wheel. It's like a Garrett 35R turbine wheel.
Holy shit! Yeah.
And this is an S400 turbine wheel. Okay, So which one of these is going to deal with you snapping the throttle shut and not having the blow off valve? Which one of these is going to deal with that stress better? This one's going to whip around, probably scuff the cover, maybe shift the wheel, maybe affect the balance. And the next time you go up to 193,000 RPM, it's just going to poop itself. You know, this one's going to laugh at you. Understood. Okay, do it again. Do it again. Thank you, sir. May I have another? You know, that's what's going to go on with S400.
The torque load, it just doesn't care about.
It doesn't care. It's strong enough. It doesn't get damaged by that. So not only do you want to consider singles or twins, do you want to, you know, just be, oh, I'm Mr. Math. I want to just talk about inertia and transient response, but I also want, maybe you want a bulletproof turbo, you know? How many times do you see S400s just break?
Never.
Okay. Why? Because they're really robust, you know?
They're
really robust turbo.
That is like a 1/4-inch ratchet to a 1/2 inch is what I just saw.
Yeah.
And everybody knows how much torque you can put through a 1/4-inch versus a 1/2 inch. I mean, who's broken a 1/2 inch ratchet? Or
I can't remember doing it recently.
Unless you're being retarded. How? You can put like 450 foot-pounds through a 1/2 inch extension and everything and no problem.
But that's the difference. And it's this part that I'm talking about where the compressor wheel lives.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why people snap the compressor wheel off.
Snap that off, man. Guess what you just did with the other part? This is turning. You still got 40 pounds of exhaust manifold pressure here. Guess what you're doing with this?
Touchdown.
You just made a turbine cannon with that little thing standing out the side of your fender. That's that instead of a side exit, now that's actually a firing squad.
It'll blender down the big end and come out.
It will.
Or it'll fold up. Done.
It'll fold up these little inducer tips and it'll shoot right out.
Homemade potato cannon.
Right. Yeah. A whirling, glowing red knife cutter thing.
Whirly bird.
Yeah.
Well,
and if you think about things like that, like I do, and you're concerned about things like that, like I am, you know, I've seen people that go ahead and just cross bolt their downpipe, you know, one simple 3/8 bolt, you know, with a couple of little gussets welded on the outside of the downpipe, one little 3/8 bolt there, might could save somebody's life, you know. And I hate to be a safety first Clyde, but you know, I started off talking about my dead friends. So, you know,
the older I get, the more I find safety as important as much as
I want to do this again.
You
see, I don't want to just do it once and live through it. I want to do it regularly.
The older you get, the more you see bad shit happen. Is the focus.
Too often. You know, I don't want to go into a big safety preacher thing, but
it's nice to try.
Nobody wants to listen to it. So
I mean, well, so do you want to do another question?
Yeah, let me see. I highlighted a couple other ones that were really how to properly size from Ron Kale. We talked about sizing.
Ron Kale's a friend of mine.
Okay, cool
guy.
Well, ask Ron if the way I described step 1, 2, and 3 of sizing a turbo by looking at a compressor map was kind of what he was looking for or not.
Yeah, it's all like I always say, for almost every single answer and every question for every person is, what are your goals?
It's hard to ask a question and get the answer that's helpful to you if that you don't convey that at the same time.
Yeah, because that's like the tree on a flow chart. Here's the goal, and then vehicle weight, horsepower, 1/4 mile.
What supports that goal? Yeah, what's underneath?
Yeah, literally, that? Like I said to people, it's like a currency where you're like, I want $10,000. Well, here's $500 for this and $500 for fuel, and like it's all grows into that goal. And then you can find
that's kind of what I had highlighted for the most part, really. I think we kind of hit. Oh, here was one. Tim Webb asked a great question. What's a high-end turbocharger, and how does that relate to the sloppy mechanics?
Okay. Well, some people also said, so you might want to start with this. I saw earlier in the chat, would you ever do a sloppy style turbo? Which people might have picked up that you already started doing that because of this.
I have, and I didn't start off thinking I was going to do sloppy style turbos either. Yeah. I started off thinking I was going to use, Garrett ball bearing cartridges and sell $2,000 and $3,000 turbochargers to Chevrolet guys. But I quickly realized that the feature set that I was putting into a $2,000 or $3,000 ball bearing turbocharger wasn't a feature set that any of you needed.
Yes.
And there's not really a reason for any of you to pay for it.
Yes.
There's not really a reason for me to try to offer it.
Unless you have that 5% outlaw drag radial. Like I say to like people about like forced inductions, people think I hate on like Jose, and I'm like, you know what? He is amazing at building a class killer once a month. And if you are that 1%er, you absolutely need what he's selling because he is innovating once a day. And his do make like that 1% more than everybody else. And in that league where people are going 390, 388, 392, you absolutely need that leg on everybody. But if again,
and that's what I started with.
Yeah.
Trying to do Chevrolet turbos. I started with that end of it, and I realized I was like, there's about 6 people to sell turbos like that too. You know, there's not 6,000 people like that to sell turbos too. So then I started to realize, you know, I don't even want a turbo like this on my own truck. That's when I started to realize, and this goes into Tim's other part of Tim's question: are your turbos made in America with all premium parts, or are they all China shit? He said. It turns out not all of that Chinese stuff is caca. Okay. You guys have seen it for years. You know, you've seen eBay stuff. You know, Richard's done plenty of dyno tests on eBay turbochargers. You know, at the very least, they work well for a while. Yeah. So it really kind of came down to me. I was looking at the problem, and it kind of came down to me. I was like, we know what I need to do. I just need to cherry pick the best Chinese parts that I find. You know,
I've been you can't manufacture it for the price people want to buy, and that's useless.
Yeah. If you can't offer the turbo, the $600 or $700 or $800 turbocharger that somebody's interested in, then just go home. It doesn't matter. Okay. So if that's the price point, the $600 to $800 price point for one of these turbochargers, you've got to use some Chinese parts to do that.
That's what people are asking. What's the price point on the sloppy FP turbos?
Okay, that's the HD series. So my Chevrolet turbos, my truck turbos, so to speak, are in 2 categories: FP style ones and HD style ones. So every one of those turbochargers that you see in our FP turbo section is either an HD model, a Happy Dragon model, okay, or a Force Performance model. The Force Performance ones are the models that I actually manufacture all the parts. I either manufacture them here or I manufacture them in Asia exactly the way I want them. The Happy Dragon turbochargers are me just pulling up to Chinese Turbo Walmart, grabbing a cart and just going in there and squeezing melons until I get all the perfect parts I want and put them in a container and ship them over here and build turbos with them.
Yeah.
That's how you hit the price point though. Okay. And it turns out you don't have to have a billet heat shield for an extra $114 to do what you want to do burnouts and go get ice cream. You don't have to have a point milled compressor wheel that adds an extra $200 to the price of the turbo. You don't have to have a ball bearing cartridge. You don't have to have a lot of these features to do it. Burnouts and ice cream. See, I knew I learned a lot from you.
My friend Joey that makes the turbo manifolds, his sister or cousin is a graphic artist, and she made these simply under the guise that he says it. So I think that's funny because I say it all the time. I'm like, 100% burnouts and ice cream can be a goal, and don't be ashamed of that, because 90% of people want to do that and they just can't admit it, or they feel ashamed that they're not going 9s.
Somebody reminded me the other day that one of the things we're supposed to do in this life is the pursuit of happiness, right?
Have fun.
Okay.
Imagine
that's one of our things we can still do. We can still pursue our
You're
happiness,
allowed to have fun.
Yeah. So don't let things get in the way, like a $2,000 turbocharger when you can get a $700 turbocharger.
There's a lot of that money you can spend responsibly somewhere else to finish a car instead of.
And that's one of the favorite things I love doing on Facebook. I'll see these threads and I'll see the guys going, hey, well, should I buy this intake? Should I buy this? Should I buy that? And I'm like, you know what, man? I think maybe spend some money on a converter, you know?
That's huge. We brought that up before many times. Converter is huge.
Converter gets overlooked a lot, and it's one of the most important, I think, one of the most important components to having a really fun project.
Yeah, it makes the engine and the drivetrain and the turbo all work.
Yes. Yeah. All of that works together. You can't, everybody throws a 4L80 in there. I did it. You know what I did? I put the 4L80 in there. I never even looked up the gear ratios. Okay. I just did it because you said, everybody says 4L60s, don't use them, can't use them. Just three neutrals, first day out, right? So don't even try.
Though, yep.
I believed that. I took it out. I called up Jake's Transmission here in Texas, and I got a really nice 4L80 from them. It hadn't missed a beat in the 2 years I've been beating on it. But what I didn't realize is that the first gear ratio is so much different than my 4L60.
That's what a lot of
I put it all together, and I go, and I'm like, I'm going to do burnout today, okay? And I'm like, wait, nothing's happening, and I'm like, why isn't it going anywhere? What the hell? What is the matter with this? And Scott yells at me. He's like, well, you didn't change the rear axle ratio. It's still a 370, and you did this to the first gear, and you put the stock, 1-ton van converter in it, so that's what you get, well, it took another week later to put a 456 rear pinion in it, and that fixed it, and then a converter fixed it even more. So
I have mentioned before that people are so afraid to gear something, and I'm like, why do you need to go 130 in second?
No, don't.
Stop.
That's a really bad idea.
Some guy was like, what cam and what headers and what springs and what, and one of the sloppy groups, and we're like, bro, put 456s in. And people's brain goes in nuts. And we're like, you have a 33-inch tire stock. You have 327 gears. It goes 75 in first. No wonder it feels...
Get rid of that.
It feels awful because...
it's terrible.
It 3,000 RPMs, like 40 miles an hour. Of course it's going to feel awful.
It feels like a turd when you put it together that way.
And then they're like, well, because I always gear like... Even like my Colorado on the mild tune-up made 850 wheel... And it was 373s and a 28. And what I like to shoot for in a lot of the power levels I do is 50, 100, 150 with, the first three gears. And people have a car that goes 75 in first with 400 wheel. And I'm like, I don't think you're understand, because people were always surprised, I think, to know some of those cars had 410s and 373s. And they had
just about everything that came with a 4L80 had 410s.
Yeah, so that's what I say to people. Why are you happy with the 323 is absolute garbage.
Get it out of there. Or go get you a 6,000 RPM converter.
Yeah, and I had a 28, and these guys have a 33, 31. I'm like, I don't think you're understanding the math there. You're pushing against so much leverage.
They're either not understanding it or they never even thought of it. That's the pitfall I fell into. I never even considered it. Nobody mentioned it to me.
The gearing is like picking up 250 wheel. No cost.
Oh, it was night and day when we put the 456 in it, dude. Night and day, man.
And people are like so scared of that 456. I'm like, you have overdrive and lockup. And I guarantee
I do. I have overdrive and lockup. And let me tell you, I can run a 456 and a 28-inch tire. I can run down the highway at 3,000 RPM going like 75 miles an hour.
I was literally going to say that. 75 is 3,000 or less in most cars.
That's what my truck does. And I'm really, I hope I pull it off. It's kind of an ambitious plan, okay? And I really do hope I pull it off. But I really want to take the boost tow on Rocky Mountain Race Week 2.0 later in the summer.
Oh, that'd be
and
awesome.
I want to tow my camper trailer full of t-shirts and set the camper trailer up in the parking lot and sell t-shirts while I'm racing.
That would be awesome.
And all those, and I hadn't said it out loud to a whole lot of people. Now I said it out loud to a whole lot of people, but I really want to try to pull that off. And so one of the things I'm working on right now is just enough oil cooling and transmission cooling and those sorts of things so that I can pull a 5,000 pound camper.
People continually ask me like, I want to tow and I want to have gigantic turbo. Is that okay? And I'm like, just the radiant heat, being able to scrub it is your only problem. The horsepower is not a problem.
Ditching the heat's the trouble.
But when you hit a 8-mile grade and your trans temp in 2 miles is 250, you're not.
Well, you got to be able to lock that converter up and have it hold and not slip, or you're just going to die in that transmission heat. Sure.
Even like the I'm like, guys, running down the road, making a bunch of hits, everything else. Once you start towing something and your coolant temperature goes, you got to scrub all the BTUs. Like that's literally all there is for reliability is keeping temperatures in check. There's no other issue.
hmm And what's cool on my Tahoe is the four-wheel drive version of the Tahoe has this aluminum skid plate that goes right underneath the engine pan.
Ah,
Okay, so I put the cooler and the fan right on that, and put
oh, it
that right
scoops
underneath the
it.
motor. Fits perfect, man. It's
Wow,
great.
that's awesome. Well, should we move on to the next
Yeah, yeah. Let's move
question?
on. I think that's pretty much the the ones that I wanted to just jump on right out of the box.
These guys say Zona stuff is art and Zona stuff is nice. So maybe you want to explain. So you have created like a HD series for Sloppy, and then you
Yes.
have FP turbos. Like I've always known them as. What's funny is I didn't know about Force Performance or you, but people are like FP green, FP red, FP black, and
Without even knowing what that was,
I
kind of.
know that that's like something people do and it works well. And then there's Zona Rotor, which I first was introduced to the Zona name because of I have a friend named Jordan Martin and he runs them on like a high 6 second stock turbo location GTR. And then other people
Yeah.
that use Zonas are Fat House Fab. Do you know those guys?
Oh, real well. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
they have
Jeremy and
like
Ben are great
those
guys.
1500R series
Yep.
stick shift Mustangs that make a retarded amount
Stick
of
shift
power with the
records. Yeah.
Zonas. Yeah.
Stick shift record holders with one of those cars.
I
Yeah.
remember just a funny story, not to make any fun of Jeremy. He's their fab guy, and he drove one of those cars like 1,000 miles, went to a race, banged out like an 820, and came home with air conditioning and everything in one of those cars just to be like this to
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
He's like, I'm not a driver. I weld.
Yeah, I help build them. I'm not a
And
professional
he's like,
driver.
bup, 820, and then he leaves. So
Well, part
that's,
of that's the Motec too,
yes.
and
And if people don't understand, that's pretty amazing for like a near 4,000 or 4,000 pound street car.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
wild.
4,000 pounds and 1,600 horsepower, it'll go.
Yeah.
It'll go as long as you make sure that it's not going to break. As
Ah,
long as you deal with your
Jeremy
structural
and Ben
issues.
are good people, this guy says. That's totally true.
What do you say?
This guy out of nowhere, Force Fed Red, says Jeremy and Ben are good people. I
They
definitely
are.
know that.
They're good people, man. They're real good people. I know those guys since the '90s.
I
Yeah.
think Jeremy can build something more beautiful than most people have ever seen while he's sleeping.
I tell you, if you think, man, Matt, if you think his headers and stuff are nice, you should see some of the jewelry he makes. Also,
Oh yeah? Oh yeah, I
he makes
forgot he makes
rings.
that. Yeah.
Oh
As
man,
a
yeah.
spare project. The rings. I see the rings all the time. If people don't know, look up Jeremy at Fat House Fab on like
Yeah.
Instagram and stuff like that.
But yeah, the Zona Rotor stuff is the complete opposite end of the spectrum from my HD series. My HD series is I'm going to give you what you need to party with 20 psi on Chevrolets for the most affordable price point I can do it.
Obviously
And
that's
then
very popular now.
it's becoming more and more popular all the time, and you've been a big part of that. And then on the other side of the spectrum is Zona Rotor, which is like actually a motorsports grade turbocharger. The Zona Rotor has the Zona Rotor cartridge is a variable preload ball bearing angular contact ball bearing cartridge. It has an enormous water jacket for cooling in it. You can run these steady state at full output. These are the kind of turbocharger. The materials that are in these and the method of construction, the geometry of the water jackets, and the material that the turbine housings are made of, and the shaft speeds that they can run. It's not anywhere else. There's not any other products that are like that. They can run at higher shaft speeds, higher PRs, maintain better compressor efficiency, and with the UHF turbines, they're just doing kind of almost witchcrafty style
That's
things.
what Jordan was saying. The amount of horsepower per pound from like 6 to 60 is consistent or better. And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, from 6 pounds
Yeah,
to
see, it's
60
different.
pounds."
It's a lot different because like a lot of the GTRs will run 60 pounds of boost.
Yeah, I mean, he
an
trapped.
RS3 will run 60 pounds of
He
boost.
trapped like 212 or 215 the last time I was there. I was like, "Wow, that actually makes a lot of power." And in my opinion, the 6-speed transmission that they use in GTRs is horribly ineffective because they have to like bounce the car out of first, hit second for like a quarter of a second, and then they can start accelerating. If they had a glide, the car would be outstandingly faster.
I think people are putting GTRs together with completely
Varen
different drive lines now.
Varen is doing it.
You know,
He started one like 3 years ago as like a pro mod, a
mhm,
25.2 or 25.5. I
mhm.
don't remember exactly.
Yeah, his I think looks a lot like Tony Palo's, which has been going on a similar amount of time, but
What
it's a
I'm
very,
annoyed with,
very artful car. Yeah.
Varen is too good of a guy to ever say it, but I always say it. He started that first, and when he dropped off his car, I think the rest of those guys were like, he can't be first, and they built their cars before him, in my opinion, because he dropped it off like 3 years ago. I asked him the other day when I was at World Cup, and it's been 3 years, and I'm like, these assholes have their car done in like 1.5. So you sparked something, and they never finished because they didn't want you to be the first.
Well, I don't think that was probably a conscious thing. It's probably easy to talk about it that way, but but I don't know if that's exactly the timeline
It
of
may
it.
not be because I see
But
things in
but
black and
but but
white.
but it is such a great idea though. The bottom line there is that taking that GTR and the 2,500 horsepower you can make with it, and then just connecting it to
A
a
glide.
sequential manual transmission or a glide or something like that with an actual rear axle from a Pro Mod, turns it into a GTR Pro Mod essentially.
Yeah, I mean, like, I was like, imagine hitting first all the way through and being able to pour the power and then just clicking high and
Mm,
calling it in a day. And the eighth,
mm.
like, imagine the car is probably going to pick up a second.
And not break and not need another $25,000 transmission for
Yeah.
every event you want
Well,
to go to.
actually, what did you say how much the transmissions are?
25K.
Oh, I'm going to blow your mind. They're like 50.
Well, I mean, to service it, I mean, you buy it for 50.
Okay,
We do
yeah.
some events, you got to send it back. It's 25K to every time you want to,
People
you know,
might not
service.
know, but there's two transmissions a lot of those guys run. There's a big tire GTR and a regular GTR. So they run same tire size, and then there's a
Mhm.
big tire GTR that has a larger rear tire. So those are like $15,000 more because they have offset gear ratios for the smaller front and
Mhm.
the larger rear tire. And
Mhm.
then the money is
Mhm.
like 45 to $60,000 for a trans.
It's
And
a
what
different kind of racing, man. It's a different kind of. It's not a sloppy style racing at all.
No, and what
It
Jordan was explaining to me is you screw up the launch or the burnout and you toast the clutches.
quite
They're
possibly,
gone.
quite possibly. Yeah,
You
you do it
warp the
wrong.
steels and they're gone.
You do it wrong and it's expensive. And that's what I was talking about the other day. I was at the dyno with my Tahoe and it was floating and it started ticking and everything. And I was just laughing. I was just laughing because
Yeah.
it didn't cost $20,000. You know,
No.
it wasn't going to cost $20,000 to fix it.
What
We're
am I
just
going
going
to
to take it
trash
apart,
a set of free
change some
cylinder
liver,
heads?
you know, it put it back together. No big deal. No big deal. But the Zona Rotor stuff is that it focuses on maintaining proper map to EMAP ratios all the way up to 60 or 70 pounds of boost pressure. Those things can run tip speeds that you don't see in any other turbochargers. So the horsepower per size of turbo, the physical size of the turbo, you might have a turbo that's only this big, but you might be able to put 1,100 wheel horsepower down with it. And they end up being it's the other end of the price spectrum also. So it doesn't end up being a $700. It ends up maybe being a $2,700 turbo. But if you want to run 65 pounds of boost, if you want to run 65 pounds of boost on something and have it work well, you've got to have all the right bits. And that's really what we focused on with Zona Rotor. Zona Rotor is a company that we developed in conjunction with Tile. Tile is a cooperative effort from Force Performance and Tile to create Zona Rotor as
Oh,
its
I
own
didn't know
independent
that.
turbocharger company. So, and we have our own foundry in Michigan. So Zona Rotor and Tile have their own foundry in Michigan where we cast the turbine housings. Those are made in America. We machine all the parts for the bearing housings and compressor housings there too. Some of the parts, some of the bearing, even ball bearings are made in America. So there's a Zona Rotor is more of a just kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from my Happy Dragon.
Yeah, people, like I always say, I think I've said it to you also. People are sometimes upset with they think that sloppy is like 100% China market and then they hate on that. And what I've brought up many times is we use the cheap stuff to kind of inspire American manufacturing, because a lot of times what I've found is we find the cheap stuff that works, and then people in American manufacturing can duplicate or work with that or learn from it for the customer base and do it better for less money most times, in my experience. And there is a whole user base that is very sensitive to American only, and then they can do that. And I don't
There
think
is, that was something I struggled with a lot, actually, moving into the sloppy environment. You know, the embracing of offshore manufacturing, the embracing of, like, you know, the pride in it being bullshit Chinese parts.
yeah,
You know, and it wasn't so much the pride in the being the bullshit Chinese parts; it was the pride in being a bullshit Chinese copy of my friend's part. My
understood.
friend,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, it's like, so that's what bothered me about that part of it. And, you know, I guess I just kind of had to learn to grow with that and live with that. You know, that, you know, yeah, tile wastegates are really good, but I guess they cost $150 too much, and so therefore everybody's going to use a Chinese copy of it
It's
instead.
tough, right? Because you want to
You
build a
know,
car, but you don't want to spend $600 on a wastegate.
300 something dollars, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have two
If
30
you have twins,
or
yeah. See, if you've
44s or
decided to go twins,
something,
all of your costs are
and then
higher.
you
Yeah.
get like for $200 you get two, and then even sometimes if there's a little bit of issues, again for burnouts and ice cream, you don't care.
For burnouts and ice cream, it makes total sense. And I get it, you know, I get it. But like my friend Adam Hodson, he was doing this horsepower show thing for Netflix, you know, and they had $10,000 to build their car with, you know,
Yeah.
and to stay on budget, what did they do? They used a Chinese copy of a tile wastegate. Okay,
Yeah.
what happened? They go to the dyno, they can't make boost. What's the problem? Well, the valve was bent right in the box.
Yeah, I've seen them also where like the valve seat's
So,
really high and they never hit the seat or
you
the
know,
fire ring.
so you know, you just have, you know, you have quality issues. You know, it's not so much that, like, oh, China, they don't know how to make things. Well, clearly they know how to make intercontinental ballistic missiles. They know how to make warships. You know, they know how to make anything they want to make. Okay, but there's also people that have factories over there that don't make things very well, and they don't even care to try to make things very
Absolutely.
well.
And then the other issue is
You know,
people here that sell it, it's hard to 100% quality check it. And then also, so we've gone over this many times, and I'm actually going to do like a tuner series on this because customers have grown to be bad. And then if your tuner's like, I won't touch this, they're like, this guy is awful and I'm going to write bad reviews. And like, it's such a weird market now. The customer's always right thing has gone too far. And we want to
it
like,
is a little too far, because sometimes the customer causes a lot of his own problems, and it
yes,
gets in his own way sometimes.
yes, because
And you could be sitting there ferociously trying to help a dude that's just seriously mad at you, and he's not going to get unmad.
they won't listen. No.
You
And
know,
then
and
the
it's like,
issue,
I'm just really trying to figure out what is wrong, so that when I fix it for you, you like me again. Okay. It is, and I don't even think it has anything to do with anything you bought from me, but I'm going to talk to you for 45 minutes trying to figure out what it is,
yeah.
so that you can realize I'm actually trying to help you. You
Yeah,
know?
and my friend locally has a Subaru shop, and he will like help people on stuff, and then they're mad about something irrelevant, and they're not understanding that he already didn't charge for his time on
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
mad still, and they're not
Yeah.
understanding that.
How about the guys that go and give you a review when they didn't even buy anything from you?
I mean, what's awesome about what I do is that doesn't exist in my
You don't
world.
sell anything, so you don't have a
But
problem.
I
But
understand that struggle. And what I've also said is we've done, I think I've had Ryan Gary, the owner of Area 1320 locally, a Subaru shop. We've had him on one of the older shows. And, you know, I said to guys, it's okay if you're building this yourself for the expectation that you have. But if you're taking it to a shop, like he has insurance, he has rent, he has electricity, he has workers, he has what your expectation of is if he builds you a motor and it has a problem, he's absorbing the rebuild.
He's got a $15 an hour kid from high school that sweeps.
His overhead is much more. So you have to understand that if I say a car was 8s for 8, you have to duplicate that. You have to have mechanical ability.
That means you have to put the sweat into it. That's the parts.
And I thought that was conveyed enough, but sometimes people don't get it, and then they're mad that it costs money.
Critic, you know. Yeah.
And I'm like, you're paying for his overhead and talents and experience. And if he doesn't want to tune a car with whatever wastegate, whatever injector, it's because he's anticipating there being a problem.
There's going to be some kind of problem that's going to result in you being dissatisfied and it being his fault.
You're mad at him. So yeah, there's a nice rant about that, but that's a whole other. Where do we start? This is my biggest problem. I don't even.
How did we get here? I don't
even know where we started. Go to the next question.
Yeah, I don't know. You got a question now. Go ahead. Your turn.
Oh, so this is decent. First one I looked at. Why aren't there more reverse rotation turbos? Seems like there's a clear normal direction, but the opposite is hard to find.
Yeah, I saw that one too, and that there's a lot to say about that. A couple of different aspects to that, really. Okay, so in the beginning, there was Air Research and Red J, and you made tooling. You didn't want to make any more tooling than you had to, and Ford, Mercedes, Saab, and Volvo all used the same T3 turbo that turned one direction from Air Research in the 80s. Okay, they didn't each have their own compressor cover. They didn't each have their own bearing housing. They didn't each have their own turbine housing. The economy of it was such that they all used the same castings because Garrett could supply a lot of them, right? And that's the parts they had. As time goes on and cars have to get lighter, more efficient, better mileage, if we don't cast something with a 14 millimeter wall, if a 10 millimeter wall is all it needs, okay, we don't do that sort of thing anymore. So we come to like to a Focus RS, and the engine's got to sit right here, and the alternator's right there, and the ACD pump is right there, and the turbo needs to fit right here. What does Ford say? Whoever's going to get this contract is going to make this turbo fit right there perfectly. Okay. Well, a lot of cases that ends up being something that turns the other direction, so that the way the housings wrap and fold, it packages well. So really, counter rotating or opposite direction, or what we call a left-hand rotation turbocharger, is kind of a result of packaging. Okay, the first time I ever really encountered them was with the Evo 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because that was the packaging issue, and that happened, and that's actually what caused. That's what actually caused our group to go into making billet wheels in 2006. Okay, not because we thought billet wheels were cool, but because there were no other cast wheels that were bigger that we could put in the turbos to make upgrades with. So we started making billet wheels. But what you see today now is, since that has, that barrier's been broken, and there are plenty of turbochargers that rotate in either direction, what you're starting to see in the aftermarket is people trying to get a market share of aftermarket by saying, hey, I'll double up on all my tooling and make 2 sets of tooling to sell that one model turbocharger, so that I can make them artfully point the same direction. So it's started to kind of become a thing, and Zona Rotor, we make several models that turn left, in addition to our standard right models, So Zona Rotor has what they call echo pairs. PT has counter-rotating pairs. Garrett has counter-rotating pairs. It's kind of a thing now. And even Chinese turbos have counter-rotating pairs.
I have a set of VS 6762s that are V-band inlet, and they look they're super fancy for me. They even have a compressor dip coating on them.
Cool. Cool, man. Yeah, my Happy Dragons are going to expand into counter-rotating pairs also. When I moved into the market, I wanted to start with like about 4 turbos, and just start doing it, because you taught me that. You see what I'm saying? You see what I just did there?
It's like a diner. If you have...
Get in there and get started, okay?
If you have
so I made 4 turbos.
things...
I'll add the mirror stuff later, but... and so I'll add some of that probably for the end of this year, the beginning of next year. But right now, I just tried to make some Happy Dragon turbos and some FP turbos for Chevrolet applications that are just affordable. And I didn't tackle the mirror thing yet. If you got a real hard on for the mirror thing, we do have Zonas that mirror. So if the aesthetics of it is that interesting, I definitely do have options for that. But it's the motorsports grade stuff that is just race car stuff. I don't have any of the entry level, sloppy price point level stuff that is mirrored. But why don't you see more of it? Because everybody already has tooling that turns the other direction, and quite honestly, it's not like tornadoes and the hurricanes in the southern hemisphere versus the northern hemisphere. It's got no impact on what happens to the air. There's nothing like that going on at all. It's completely a packaging feature, really.
Here's a good question. Regular Cars is on here. Fairly, I know him. And he has a decent question here just for fun, like if you could summarize it, if you know anything about it. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, he goes, why did Borg Warner's stock tank in 19? Did they miss out on a big contract? That's fairly interesting.
I don't know.
You're not affected by them.
I would say that Borg Warner is probably one of the most useful and probably financially happy turbocharger companies out there. I mean, they got a huge share of the market for automotive applications, European applications.
I would agree. Like almost everything stock is a Borg.
Yeah. Though Mitsubishi still holds a lot. We've got how the new McLaren 720s, Mitsubishi turbos. McLaren 650s, Mitsubishi turbos. Of course, all the Mitsubishi cars, Mitsubishi turbos. Subaru, a lot of Mitsubishi turbos on Subarus. Chevrolet Camaro. I've got a 2018 Camaro with a 2-liter LTG in it. That's got a Mitsubishi turbo in it. So Mitsubishi has a pretty good choice, a slice of OEM turbochargers as well. But I don't know what was up with stock in 19.
This guy here says a Borg plant was destroyed. Now, is that similar to like when I heard there's plants that
that was a tornado or something.
There's plants that make nitrous oxide, and a couple years ago, a couple of those plants had to shut down or also had issues due to EPA or who knows, I don't know. But then nitrous oxide quadrupled in price after that because it's just not as available.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's definitely a case where you could have big swings in market price on some of these things because they're not produced in a lot of different places, and definitely like Zona Rotor is not produced in a lot of different places. We make it in Michigan, we make it in Texas, and with the virus that we had this past year, Michigan had a lot of restrictions on having businesses open, and it turned out that being American based ended up being a huge liability this past year
because they had to shut down.
Because the governor of Michigan would not let plants run.
Similarly, Elgin is in Michigan, and my rep there took forever to get back to me about some things, and he's like, "Sorry, dude, we've been on 90% shutdown. I haven't even been in here forever." So there's. I
mean, they legit set up 1-800 tattle lines for people to call and go, "Did your boss ask you to come back to work?"
But believable. That's disgusting, but that's where we are.
Yeah. So.
Oh man. So, well, after all that, pick a new subject because we're so far gone. I don't know where we started. That's classical fashion for me.
Well, I like to talk about. I want to go back to that converter thing because it seems like we always overlook that, and that's always something. And I know we're supposed to talk about turbos. But
I would say
lightly has to go through a converter. So
I would say lightly touch on the converter because I have a 4-hour thing with Ryan Jans about blasting people with converter. And
okay. But I just too many people forget and they don't even want to talk about it. And it happened to me. It was a huge pitfall for me to change the first gear in a 4L80.
It's 90% of the combo is converter. So do it.
Yeah. It is. It's like one of the first questions I ask when people say, "Hey, what turbo should I use?" And there was one guy that's like, anytime I try to get on a forum and ask, what turbo should I use? I get 15 people say, buy this 88 millimeter, and 15 people say, run 78, 75, and with no real explanation of anything in the middle. But really,
case
a lot of this
and converter.
A lot of it's converter, man.
People
A
are
lot
like,
of it.
I want to, what works good, what cam and what turbo for a stock converter. I'm like, stop. You're never going to be happy till you just do the converter first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then hang the turbo, and
Go
then
ahead and just get a
cam or
little bit
turbo.
looser converter than
Yeah.
what you have.
The converter and a gear ratio is absolutely the first thing you should do if you have no other money aside and you don't have the mechanical ability, or like, I, not to be like weird egotistical, but I'm like, I'll do cam, converter, springs, turbo, injectors, fuel system all at once because I have a lot of experience in it. I know what to do.
You know the recipe.
But I'm like, the rest of you guys should just probably do gears and a converter. And then most of you are going to be like, wow, I can burn out from a dead stop. I can fry my tires, or whatever. And then you can even decide if you don't want to do a turbo at that point. You're already like, wow.
Yeah, you already got a lot, mucho gusto right there, man.
Put some money aside to hang a turbo on it later. Because like I always said, the whole premise of the Don't BS Me build is I explained to people that 450 wheel in majority of vehicles is more than most people can drive with.
It's going to be really eye-opening, especially if this is the first time you've done this.
Okay? Especially a turbo automatic that handles the shifts like an 80E. I would take people for a drive in my truck with the much dumbed down 4.8 7875, and they knew it was capable of, like, I think I made 670 before blowing through my converter horrendously. And I would take them for a drive, and they're like, wow, 650 wheel is absolutely retarded. I'm like, that's 5 pounds of it.
This is 500. This is not 650.
It was 400 wheel.
400, yeah.
And people are like, holy shit, this is wild. Like, and then I would turn it up to whatever made like about 650 wheel that the converter could cope with. And I do like 1,000 foot, just stab the throttle and do 1,000 foot burnout, like over 100 miles an hour front wheel speed.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is scaring the shit out of me.
Yeah. I'm done. I don't want it anymore.
And I'm like, this is 600 horsepower.
You see that thread all the time. It's like, okay, I'm aiming at 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower.
And that was a 3,800 pound truck. It was 3,850, and that was 600 horsepower. And people all the time would come to me at the dyno and be like, well, I have a Fox that weighs 3,000 with me in it, and I want about 850, 1,000. And I'm like, this will literally make you vomit. It'll be so wild.
Yeah.
And if it's an 80E, I'd always have to have like a father-son talk. If it's an 80E and you stab it at 40, it'll ignite the tire and shift. If you don't have it in manual, if you don't have it in drive 3, it will go 200 miles an hour and lock the converter. And when most people's brains are like lift, even if they do, I'm like, you should have lifted, going. You should have lifted 400 and
it's
some
too late.
feet ago. Because you're already done. And if you're stupid and you touch the brakes, you're totally fucking done. You're already, you're totally done. Like, you don't even get it. We call those, from me and my friends, we call them a holder. They're in it way too long, and the 80E is up into high, 150 mile an hour wheel speed.
So you got front tires that are going 35 or 40 miles an hour. You got rear tires that are going 120 miles an hour.
If you're sideways and you touch the brakes, it is going to be worse than sideways.
That was the first thing I realized when I was in this truck. I was like, I think I'm not going to let off the brake.
Yeah. Well, that's, I try to tell people from my experience.
I think I'm going to stay in the brake the whole damn time.
If you are, I say like as a general rule of thumb, if you don't know and you're learning, if you are left and right flat and you touch your wrists, you should start rolling into the brake pedal. Because what it's going to do is slow down the front.
Don't lift.
Don't lift. Because it'll probably slingshot you into the passenger seat.
Yeah.
Or it'll upset the vehicle enough to put you into a spin out. But I'm like, if you roll into the brakes, it's going to grab enough of the front for you to steer back to normal. And
I wanted to hear this conversation before I found myself doing that.
Nearly dying, rocking the boat. Right?
There was one of the GoPros, I think, on that burnout video that I did for the Tahoe. It was
lift
really
throttle.
It was a lot.
That's the worst noise is when you hear someone lift. You don't hear wastegate or turbo, and you hear They're just trying to. I'm like, you need to get back into it, or you should have rolled into the brake. You don't have to hold the brake the whole time, but if it starts
No,
to,
just some pressure. Just like if
yeah.
you're rally driving, just put a little pressure into it so you got something else going on.
And I think one of the issues is they'll see my videos where, not to be again an egomaniac, but I have a lot of experience. I always tell people if I had learned how to do this years ago, I'd be dead. I slowly learned how to make more power and how to drive with it to a point where it looks easy. And I have a bunch of.
That's the scary thing about where the state of the art today. And it bothers me sometimes, and I worry about it too much probably, but that there's way too many cases where our best work that like you and I could have done for somebody 10 years ago wasn't terribly dangerous for them. But now my best work is incredibly dangerous for you.
Yeah, it's that's why I have that thing where I'm like, guys, this is a 750 rear wheel horsepower through an automatic 80E car. This will kill you on the way home. It'll absolutely kill you.
Straight up.
Like, please ease into it. Because some of those people, I'm like, what's your prior experience? And they're like, Turbo Civic. And I'm like, I do not want to condescend on you, but holy
That's a lot different.
shit. Yeah, this will totally blur your understanding of what a fast car is. Because I try to tell them, I'm like, on the dyno that I use, 850 wheel in a Fox that weighs 3,300 pounds will go 850s or better.
I'm about to say that's gonna be a really fast car.
850s at like 160, and they're like 160, and I'm like, yeah, yep. And people are always caught up. I make fun of Kyle Loftus all the time, 1320 video, but people are making 2,200 horsepower and trapping 150, and I'm like, 850 in a Fox will go 850s easily at 160 miles an hour. It's insane. They'll trap 130 something in the eighth. A lot of people don't understand an eighth mile is 660 feet. That's a city block in 100% of the United States. So imagine going 0 to 130 something in a city block, a stoplight to a stoplight.
When I was a kid, we had a hot rod. First car. This was a good question too. First car was a hot rod. 66 Ford Fairlane. Man, that car, I thought it was fast. No, it was not fast. It was not fast. You know what I'm saying? You know, I had the luxury of like growing up with something that didn't want to kill me. Exactly.
That's what that's what I just said too earlier.
It's the same thing you're talking about. And somebody that's not thinking about it very much might find themselves in a situation where they got a lot to handle. You know, it's not hard to find yourself in a situation where you got a lot to handle. The art is so advanced now. Like I said, 10 years ago, you were doing a really good job if you could take a 4-cylinder and make 500-600 horsepower with it. You know, that was outstanding. That's kind of amateur level on some of these 4G63s now for Mitsubishis. You know, even amateur level stuff is 500-600 horsepower. And the real fast guys are 1,200 horsepower billet block guys now.
Yeah, it's absurd. I always look at that. I have shirts, and I've met the guys from is it Booston Performance?
Booston, yeah.
They're always at GTR World Cup.
Devin and Kristen Schultz.
Their cars are flying in the 6s with like a 2-liter.
Hey, you want to talk about a man that has no fear
of
car? Devin Schultz has zero fear, man. That guy will send it. Send it, man.
Oh, here's a good one. I wanted to touch on this too. Someone just reminded me, and this is something I want to learn about also. He said, did we talk about compound turbos yet?
No, we haven't, but do we want to?
Part of me is like, it's a gimmick for diesel guys.
Here's the problem. Okay, so on Chevrolets, we already kind of talked about how we're not really going up to the top part of the compressor map.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, compounding is how you get right off the top of the compressor map and stack 2 compressor maps right on top of each other. Okay. So what we're doing with Chevrolets is we are not running 85 pounds of boost pressure. We're not.
So is compounds only relevant to diesels at all?
No, it's only relevant to having really high pressure ratio. Okay. The only reason you would have a compound is because if single stage turboing didn't give you enough pressure ratio. So if you have one of the best single stage turbos,
too low on the map. Is that what you're saying?
You're too low on. Yeah,
So you want
yeah.
to
Like
stack the maps.
say the map doesn't go high enough. Say you want to operate at an 8-to-1 pressure ratio,
Oh,
but the
like
turbos
8
you can
back
buy
pressure to 1 pressure ratio?
eight eight atmospheres at the outlet and 1 atmosphere at the inlet.
Can you
That's what pressure ratio is.
Oh, okay.
I said I wasn't going to do math. I might have to. Okay.
I'm a
pressure
little bit
ratio.
lost with those numbers, to be honest.
Pressure ratio is what's the ratio of the pressure at the compressor inlet versus the pressure at the compressor outlet. Okay, so you take the outlet pressure, divide it by the inlet pressure. That's the pressure ratio in absolute. So say your compressor outlet pressure is 1,000 kPa, and say your compressor inlet pressure is in absolute is 100 kPa. That's a 10-to-1.
Oh, so you're talking about compressor ratio. Wheel.
I'm talking about how much boost are we running. Yes, I'm talking about the compressor wheel.
So 1 atmosphere and 8 atmospheres at the compressor.
I got 1 atmosphere at the inlet because I'm in the world and we live in an atmosphere.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I have 8 atmospheres at my compressor outlet. Yeah. That's an 8-to-1 pressure ratio.
Understood. Yeah. Compressor
so
only.
I had 14 pounds of ambient pressure at my compressor inlet, and I have 8 times 14 pounds of pressure at my compressor outlet.
Yes.
So I'm running a lot of boost, right?
Yeah.
I'm running like 100 pounds of boost pressure.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what diesels do. Yeah. Diesels, if you want to make a bunch of power on a diesel, you go this because the pistons weigh 8 pounds a piece. Okay. You know what I'm saying? So everything's overbuilt on a diesel. If you got a Kenworth or something like that, you can run 200 pounds of pressure on it if you want to, but you might have to compound 3 turbos in a row to go that high.
Yeah. I understood.
Now, on a Chevrolet, what's going to happen to the main caps if we try to run 85 pounds of boost pressure?
We're going to push them right out.
We're just going to just shoot the bottom of the motor right out of there. So compounding has almost no application for low boost applications.
Or gasoline in general.
Yeah, gasoline in general, but I don't know. My friend Shane Tacklenberg made 2,000 horsepower on a Nissan 4-cylinder with a compound setup a couple years ago. Two ambient inhalation turbochargers go into a second stage turbocharger, and they ran like 100-something pounds of boost on that.
Turbos.
Some kind of gasoline.
3 turbos, right? So 2 small ones feeding a large.
It ended up being 2. All 3 turbos ended up being almost the same size, actually. Oh. But you're on compounding, you inhale ambient pressure air. So you inhale a lot of volume of air ambiently. So usually your first turbo where the fresh air comes in, that's your big one. That takes it up to about 30 pounds of boost. That 30 pounds goes into the inlet of the second turbo, which is smaller, okay? Because the volume, you've already compressed the air. So now the second turbo is dealing with the volume of air it wants to. It's dense. Now it takes it from 30 or 40 PSI, whatever your first stage was, and now its inlet was 30 PSI and its outlet is going to be 60 PSI.
My brain is
it's got a 2-to-1 pressure. I told you I didn't want to do math.
We're going to have another episode on compounding, because I've always, like, this person, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, how do compounds work? And I've seen like are you familiar with the Old Smoky, the California guy that owns that Pikes Peak car? It's like a really old Ford
pickup truck that really slings up that
triples mountain. And doubles, and he did Pikes Peak recently, and he's always had those. And he made a comment the one day, I believe, where he's like, everybody's feeding 3 turbos into each other, and they're intercooling the last stage before the intake. And he's like, the biggest difference we've seen is intercooling each stage, because he's like, you're smashing.
It is important to intercool between the stages for more than one reason. For not just for wow, we made a little bit better power. It's really important because you don't want to break your second stage turbo. When you have it's like, say you're running 30 pounds of boost on your first stage turbo.
Yeah,
that is probably 300 Fahrenheit air.
Absolutely easy. I've seen that in data logs over that.
So that 300 Fahrenheit air goes into the second turbo.
And then that makes 300 degrees.
And that makes it 600 degrees.
Yes.
Okay. You're beyond the temperature limits of that turbo now. Okay. So you're going to break compressor wheels like all the time, unless they're titanium compressor wheels.
Yeah. So interesting.
And if you have a titanium compressor wheel, you can no longer run an aluminum compressor housing.
Oh, because it'll just break it.
Because it won't contain
too
it.
extreme.
Yeah, it's not safe. Yeah.
Here's a funny one. I'll just answer this guy real quick. This is something I know, and you can agree or not. Why
Go
do
ahead.
some vehicles run such high boost and some don't? And that's a entire cubic inches versus efficiency thing. If you take a 7875, it'll cap at 800 wheel because the cubic inches are trying to go through the turbine. And if you put it on a 2JZ, it'll flow more boost because it's an intake restriction based off of the cubic inches, blah, blah, blah. So the smaller the engine is, so if it's a 2-liter and a 6-liter, the boost amount is different, but the CFM is the same.
But the flow rate's the same. Yeah.
600 horsepower 2-liter and a 600 horsepower 6-liter.
How high up the compressor map are you?
They're at the same, relatively, let's just summarize. They're all flowing 60 pounds a minute. But the pressure ratio seems... So I hate that, again, when like Kyle...
They're flowing the same flow rate, but one does it up here and one does it down here.
Yeah, it's the same...
And it's often the case that the compressor does this.
Yeah.
And as you go up in pressure ratio, the turbo actually likes it more.
The island is shifted, obviously.
Now you got efficiency islands that are here and down, and you're at 20 pounds of boost, the efficiency sucked. But when you went up here to 40 pounds of boost, the compressor efficiency was great.
And then turbine and camshaft and intake and head flow
all feeds together,
compound all of that. So if you take an LS engine that quits on a truck intake or relatively other ones at 6,500, and then you take a Honda engine that breathes naturally aspirated and peaks power at 8,400, that turbine part completely changes. Similar.
Yes, it does. It does. The VE, those motors is a lot different, and what happens with the turbo is a lot different.
That's like what Jordan Martin had said about GTRs, and then also I've talked to Jose before. He says the turbo he specs like a 76 millimeter billet turbo. He specifies for an LS the 5-liter Coyote. He puts a much larger turbine on.
A larger turbine wheel in it because they got a better head.
Because the RPM and the cylinder head flow.
Got a better cylinder head.
To make the same power, or also...
Yeah, 5-liter Coyote runs a lot like 2 4-cylinders.
Yes, the everything just works better because the airflow is different.
Yeah.
So that's another one of those answers that's like wholly dependent.
I'm sorry I didn't answer it, but I answered it.
I hope people get the gist of that, where... I have seen, obviously, like Felix Hamilton on Sloppy Mechanics does a lot of 2JZ stuff with VS turbos. I've done a lot of LS stuff, and I can take the Gen 1 billet 7875, one of my favorite budget turbos ever. 800 wheel is like absolute max. I've had some cars make 820 with that turbo, and that's like unicorn.
Cold weather day,
It's a unicorn setup. That's the most. And then 2J guys are making like 1100, and it's simply because the turbine with the smaller cubic inches, it can get more airflow out of that turbine. Then a larger cubes creates more exhaust gas, and you get a backup sooner. So I hope everybody can understand that.
And the head has a lot to do with that.
That too. So an LS flows really well, but if you're putting 8 cylinders into a 75 millimeter, relatively 6-liter versus a 3-liter into the same
and you
turbine.
have more pulses too, and the pulses have a lot to do with it.
They're filling it. It's like I always say to people, imagine a fire at a mall and everyone's trying to go out 3 doors. If the mall is 3 stores and if it's 6 stores, there's considerable amount of people trying to get out of those 3 doors. So
changes the congestion completely.
So it backs up sooner and people are shoving each other and they can't get out of the damn mall. And that seems dumb, but it makes a lot of sense to people.
Well, you've probably seen a lot. Richard does this test like once a year.
Of course, right? People, the only issue I see with Richard now, I love Richard. He has so much data and so many videos now. All of a sudden, people aren't interested. Like they can't absorb it all.
They can't soak it in, man. I tell you, I see what you mean by that. Because it's to the point now where he's delving deeper into topics, and in the videos consider more topics, and it's a lot more in depth.
People ask, and then he starts talking, and they deer in headlights, and they're like, "I'm suddenly uninterested in this." Oh, here's a good one. Robert, what cam do you have in the boost hoe, the Tahoe?
Well, I'll tell you.
Let me dig that up for you, boys.
It's this one. Can you read that?
It is a comp cams.
Comp cam.
So it is a 223, 225 with a, where do I see lift here?
It's just giving you the lobe lift.
Yeah, 115 LSA. So yeah, 223, 225 is the larger, what I see of average horsepower camshaft, in my opinion.
Yeah. So that is that's a on the lobe I got 353 lift. Yeah. So on a 1.7 rocker that ends up being what, like right at 600
lift, 600.
Yeah.
I couldn't see like a 1.5 lift there.
Let me tap on my trusty Hewlett Packard 48 GX here for a second.
So yeah, like a mid
600, so 600 lift, 220, 230. No, look, I'm even a little short on the exhaust. 225 on the exhaust at 50, 223 on the intake. So I've got a cam in here that shouldn't really be very sensitive to exhaust pressure.
Yeah, so that's what I tell people. The range that I see is the best average turbo cam is like a 210 to 230, almost literally like a 215 to 225 average spread at 550 to 600 lift. They all do the same thing, in my opinion.
And if you want to order the same cam I got, my
serial
friend
number.
Chris over at Comp, there's a serial number at the top.
So. 402-293-20, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. I'm not trying to make money selling cams, but I just like using Comp cams because I can trust them. And
Richard loves Comp also.
I get really good parts from them, and I've used them for years. They made all my Mitsubishi cams. I made probably 14 different grinds of Mitsubishi 4G63 cams, and sold them for, I don't know, 6-8 years, something like that. I kind of got out of the cams when the 4G63 kind of, we're running out of transmission parts for them. So,
that's another thing. I wish like a Glide existed for those people, or a TH400.
Well, we're starting to figure out how to do that. We're taking Isuzu pup trucks and Starions and anything else, and we're just putting our motors into whatever we want.
And I've seen a lot of those auto DSMs really fly now. Like all of a sudden something happened. Something happened, ladies and gentlemen, with automatic 4Gs, and they fly now automatic.
This is a compressor wheel that my friend Aaron Gregory ran for a couple of seasons, and on all the blades he wrote his records for me. I don't know, can you read that?
Yeah, I can see like a 477 at 159. So those 8th mile?
Yeah, that's 8th mile.
And then there's a 730 at 188, which is obviously quarter. 748 at 191. That's flying. 83 PSI, it says on the one. And then I think I see something at 190 plus.
Yeah, first auto all-wheel drive at 190 plus. He won our annual shootout event in Ohio like 4 years in a row.
And a quarter 190 is like 2,400 horsepower probably.
Well, the lightweight 4-cylinder Eclipse cars, so it's more like 1,300 horsepower.
Oh wow! So really much lower than I expected.
But that's an automatic transmission. This is 80 millimeter right across here. This is just 80 millimeter.
Oh, the inducer's 80.
Yep, just 80 millimeter. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Dang, that's rolling.
But you're right. Yeah. So some of those automatic DSMs are really booking, man. And most of the drag car guys you're either going into really expensive custom gearboxes and gear sets, or you're switching over to automatic to keep racing. Yeah. At this point, because there's just really not a whole lot of parts available anymore.
No. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
All right. Should we jump to another? Choose one of your subjects here. I can ask one.
Okay, let me pull my list up and see if there's one I haven't gone over yet.
Let's do non-car things, because a bunch of people ask pretty cool questions.
Okay.
Basically so I think this is cool, and this is something I almost wanted to do with a lot of my guests, where ask like non-specific. So to get people... There's a
non-turbo question on there.
Pizza topping.
Okay. What is my favorite movie?
Oh, that's a good one too.
Yeah. Okay. I have some movies that I really love. Okay. I love Plan 9 from Outer Space. Okay.
I don't think I've ever seen that. I have to write these down.
I love a movie called Green Slime. It's another 60s, early 70s sci-fi movie. I like 60s genre sci-fi movies. I watch a lot of that. So There's a series of almost spaghetti, not like spaghetti westerns, spaghetti sci-fis from Italy in the late '60s. Wild Wild West, War of the Planets, Green Slime. I like '60s era sci-fi movies. Those are my favorites. That's my happy place. And as far as what I like to watch when I'm going to bed, man, it's Star Trek, the original series. Nothing like watching Kirk and Spock solve some huge planetary issue and wrap the whole thing up in an hour. So Kirk and Spock are my favorite, and those other sci-fi movies I mentioned, Wild Wild Planet, War of the Planets, Green Slime.
I'd almost agree. Like, I'm not a huge, obviously, like, I like sci-fi because a lot of films are that, and I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, but those old, man, I'm just totally skipping on his name, but the old school Captain Kirk, like, just for ridiculousness and funny. What was his name again? You just said.
Why did you do that to me? Now I don't know.
It's gone
Kirk's
now.
name.
It's gone.
Somebody's going to type
Captain Kirk, the original.
Somebody types it. Type it. What? Oh my God! Somebody shoot me. I don't deserve to live now.
Wow, it's gone. See what I did? I just ruined it.
You killed me with that.
William Shatner.
Shatner.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
the
you.
dynamic.
Oh
I even made my profile like background picture. The guy's like Spock. He says, "Don't do the thing," and Kirk is like, "I'm gonna do the thing," and I'm like, "That's totally me." Like, people are like, "Don't do that."
Okay, there's one Star Trek episode. It's called Arena. Okay, there's a lizard guy.
I've seen it.
Guy, okay, so the lizard guy blows up. They blow up an outpost on the planet. Okay, and then the Enterprise shows up, and the lizard people, they bail. They're like, "Oh shit, we're busted." So they scat, right? Kirk goes after him, and he just keeps going warp 6, warp 7, warp 8, and Scotty and Spock are like going, "Oh my God, man, what are you gonna do?" And at one point, he goes, "Oh," he ups the warp one more time, and Spock turns around to Kirk and goes, "Captain, they might be faster than us." And Kirk, only Kirk could do. He looks over and he goes, "Well, they're gonna have to prove it." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I love that."
I just like how different he was, like the pausing and ridiculousness. And he never apologized for being so ridiculous. And that I admire that. He's like, "I'm ridiculous."
I raised two sons. They're 19 and 18, 19 right now. And the whole time I was growing up, we watched sci-fi together. It's our thing. We like watch sci-fi together. And I always told them, I was like, "You should always be yourself, man, unless you can be Captain Kirk. Then be Captain Kirk."
Some guy just writes, "There's something on the wing."
Exactly.
And then this other guy, I actually knew this because I'm a retard about pop culture. He says, "Fun fact, Michael Myers' mask is actually a Captain Kirk mask." And I knew that. What they did is they took it and they spray painted it and modified it. And that's the original Michael Myers mask is a Captain Kirk mask.
No kidding.
I actually knew that, not to be a jerk, but
I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting, though. That's pretty cool.
So like when you see that and it's terrifying, it's Captain Kirk. It's literally
Shatner. Yeah,
it's William Shatner. Is that terrifying when he's stoic holding a knife?
It's hard to believe how old he is now, though. You look at him, he doesn't even look old.
Yeah,
he's doing the Ancient Aliens show now.
Now that you said that, I don't even know how old he is because it doesn't matter. He feels like he's 56 no matter what.
Yeah, he's TJ Hooker. He stopped right there.
Yeah. Anyway, another.
You never watched TJ Hooker, did you?
I don't know that at all. So that'll be something.
That's okay, Mr. Born in 1983.
84.
84.
But yeah, there's a lot, obviously. There's stuff I don't know, and I don't have any
That's
problem
okay.
admitting.
That's okay. It's got nothing to do with making Chevys go fast. So
yeah. Fine. So here's another one that I think is good is what's your go-to pizza topping? I'm interested.
Oh, yeah, just meat lover, man. Just all the meats. All the meats. The sausage, hamburger, bacon, everything. And I order a lot of pizza, man. I like pizza. On Fridays, I order, 6, 8, 10 pizzas. And we just kill pizzas on Friday.
Everybody at the shop.
Always meat lover ones, man. Yeah, well, there's 13 of us working here, so yeah, I always treat on Fridays, and it's almost always pizzas or fajitas. Or
Oh
there's a nice little
man.
Asian restaurant around the corner now. So sometimes we'll get stir fry and rolls, but you know,
So
pizza's
you
meatloaf.
must not have a high turnover rate with giving people pizza
No, I don't have a
and
very high turnover
fajitas.
rate.
Oh
No,
man.
I keep people. I don't like to see them come and
I
go.
would stay around too.
No, no. I like my people, and I at least I think my people like me.
That's awesome. Okay. Do you want to you choose one now since I chose a bunch.
Oh,
How much back pressure is too much? Well, like we already answered that, I believe.
there was one. It was like, hey, when does it not make sense to do a compressor wheel upgrade? Rory Malloy.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah, that's a friend of mine. Yeah, he asked a bunch of different questions.
And this one I liked, and I highlighted this one. At what point does upgrading a compressor wheel become pointless? Okay. If you're already not using the compressor wheel you have, then upgrading the compressor wheel is pointless. Okay. So if you've already got a 5 gallon bucket and you're only carrying 4 gallons of water around, why do you need to go get a 7 gallon bucket? You don't. So that now, how does anybody know how much water they're carrying around? How does anybody know how much air they're moving? Shaft speed, EMAP, power, fuel injection, pulse, AFR,
Pounds per
calculated
minute, like
airflow
I
rate,
said, yeah.
off your mass flow meter. There's a variety of ways to get an idea of how much air you're moving. You can go to the dyno. If you dynoed 700 wheel horsepower, you're probably moving 75 or 80 pounds a minute of air.
So if your
So
back pressure is really low
if your rack
and
pressure is really low
and you're
and
not
you
making
haven't
any
used
horsepower, you're not really your compressor upgrade is redundant.
right, if you're
Something else
not
is wrong.
using your compressor, if you're not either going to overspeed or near the choke flow on your compressor, then upgrading the compressor is probably not going to help you. And I see that was kind of the question. I said, a friend sent me some data logs the other day. He's like, hey Robert, where do I need to go with my turbo after this? I think I keep turning it up. It didn't make more power. That was the whole 7 pounds of pressure drop in the intercooler problem, though. It wasn't that he needed a bigger turbo compressor wheel. It was that we needed to improve the pumping losses through the intercooler and the pipes. So a lot of times you think, oh, I need to do a compressor wheel upgrade. I'm tapped out. I keep turning it up. It's not making any more horsepower. Maybe it's not making any more horsepower because of the EMAP. Maybe it's not making any more horsepower because of the motor. You need some sensors. You need to do a little data logging in order to figure that out. Data log your EMAP, maybe add a shaft speed sensor, maybe put a channel into your data logging where you're going to go ahead and log your mass flow meter or something like that, where you can get an idea of where you're at as far as, how much CFM you're using versus how much CFM this turbo is supposed to have. And, if it's 1,000 CFM turbo and you're using 700, well, you don't need to do a compressor upgrade.
Yeah, something else. AR, cam,
Yeah,
intake,
yeah, yeah. Maybe
intercooler.
something else is
There's an
getting in the
airflow
right.
deficiency on the
There's a
back end.
potato in the tailpipe,
A
I always say.
potato, yeah.
Okay, go find it. Go find it. And people are like, well, there's not a potato in my tail. Of course there's not. Okay, but there's something wrong.
We talked about the
There's something wrong.
90s. The cumulative addition of all the 90s is a huge.
Yeah,
I've learned
yeah.
that over the years. 90,
Have you
90,
seen
90.
people that will take weld something onto a compressor housing and they started with like 6 90-degree elbows and they pie cut them all and it comes off and it goes like this and it turns like that?
And people go,
That
wow,
sucks.
beautiful fabrication. And
That
my brain's
sucks.
like,
Oh my God. Do I
what
have
a
one of those right
waste
here?
of everything.
I'm gonna go grab one of those. I'm gonna be right back because I want to show people what not to do on a compressor housing when you weld an elbow on. Okay. I'll be right back. Okay. You cool if I step away for a second? It'll probably
Yeah.
take me 15 seconds to go get this. Okay.
Yeah, we're
I want to show.
here. Oh man, we got a bunch of questions here too. The AR stuff is pretty good. I'm interested in what he has to say about that. I think we touched on some AR stuff, but it'd be interesting to hear him say, obviously it's like a power band shift. So I think he had touched earlier about the turbine running out or something else happening, and then the AR switch is most useful. This guy says, how's the family? Everybody's good. My wife and child are very good. Yes, lots of information tonight. Absolutely. Why isn't you were in here? Who's that? What's your favorite high ethanol content beverage? Well, we'd have to ask who's that for, me or Robert? It looks like Robert's drinking like I think he's cracked a Miller Lite or two. I told him that was absolutely fine. He was wondering the expectation of professionalism, and I said it would be no problem. This guy says Shatner with a 9-inch kitchen knife is pretty scary. Yes, absolutely. Oh man, what are we going over a bunch of stuff here? Twin 7275s for a 4.8. I know 70, what is it, 73, 6973 billets, like the S366 style Borg Warners. Twin 6973 billets are incredible for smaller LSs that will make like 1100 wheel through an automatic, if you need to know that. Disco potato stuff is something I'm 50% familiar with. But yes, sizing a disco potato correctly will be huge from making like average horsepower from 3,000 to 7,000 versus 5,500 to 7,000. Yeah, if it's not sized correctly, there's a huge difference there from like a 2860, 2871 to the 3071 like you mentioned. This guy says, I like what you're saying. Thank you. This guy says, sing. I don't think my voice is good enough for singing. My child might disagree. Matt, do you play video games? I don't have time much, but what I do have is like a RetroPie setup, and I love playing Super Nintendo games. Super Nintendo, like Bomberman, Super Mario, stuff like that. Really good. Ken has a rear-wheel drive Talon with a glide in it. Wow, that's cool. All right. I just went through like a bunch of backlog stuff, and
Okay, good.
We're ready for you now.
The little housekeeping. Okay. So like a lot of times you wish your cover had a 90-degree elbow on it. Okay. The transition of this is really nice. This is engineered to be this and have this 90 on it. Okay. This is not. Okay.
That's a compromise with packaging that shouldn't happen. Yeah. I know so
this is, somebody had a lot of wanna. Okay. Right here. They had a lot of wanna. That's look how many different pieces that is.
Just knock. That's like 60% of what you should get. Right of those bends.
So you know what, you see this happen a lot, so people can fit things, and then what'll happen is that they'll run it, they'll set a record, they'll try to set another record, and the next thing you know, they'll send it back to you, and this wheel has exploded. Okay. And the other one on the other side, which looks more like this, is not exploded, but this one is exploded. You know, and you know why? Because there's a lot of loss to do this. Like I was talking about, this air is going really fast. It does not want to do all this. Okay. It does not want to do all that. And that you pay for that. You pay for that with cash. Okay. Cash, gold, or Bitcoin is what you pay for this with. Okay. This hurts you. This hurts you. Stay away from that. You know, that is pumping loss. That's so somebody looks at a data log and they go, wow, you know, one of my turbos is running a lot more RPM than the other one. You know, something wrong with my boost, my wastegates or something like that. You know, well, no, it's probably this. You know, if you've got this on one side and not on the other side, this is probably what's causing your speed on bank to bank not be the same. This sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. This guy says, show the turbine housing with the flat section to clear frame rails. And I think he means on a GTR. And some guy, oddly enough, I was thinking of this exactly when you showed that. He said, it looks like your old Colorado comp cover setup. And yeah. And what's funny is that combo made like 90% of what most people do. And I knew it was bad. And we had done tests, I don't think I ever showed, where we went straight from the turbo into my intake. Because I had kind of a 180 to clear my weird fender front end, tiny front end situation with the Colorado. And I made an intake pipe that went, I flipped my turbo over and it was like a beautiful 45 sweep to the intake, and it made the same power on low boost, non-intercooled. So I was not giving up anything. And then the other thing we did is I had this like 90, not really, maybe like very minute pie cuts in like a shitty direction all the
Mhm.
way to the throttle body. And then I did, if you search for it, like Sloppy Mechanics, it says pretty to shitty intake pipe tests. And I had like a awful looking intake pipe and a really beautiful like twin 45s, perfectly smooth. And for at least that application, it didn't cost any horsepower. But I know when I see that, that's not a good
Well,
situation.
see, at 20, and this is again, this is like what's 15 psi is way different than 60 psi.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you might be able to get away with this if you were going to run a 2-to-1 pressure ratio. If you're going to run 15 pounds of boost is a 2-to-1 pressure ratio. Okay. 14 pounds ambient at the compressor inlet, 28 pounds ambient absolute at the compressor outlet. That's 15 pounds of boost, 14 pounds of boost. This is probably not going to kill you when you do that. Now, if you put this on a GTR and you go, hey, man, this is the finals, we got to turn it up. And we're going to run 5 more pounds of boost. And that's going to put us at 58 PSI now. This is going to kick your ass right here.
Yeah, because on that application, I would make like 990 wheel and low 20 pounds of boost. Not that much pressure.
Yeah, 20 pounds is not doing a whole lot of, that's not a lot of turbo work.
And then
that was
also,
the other reason I got really excited about Happy Dragon. I was like, you know what? This whole application, it doesn't need compressors that work at 65 pounds of boost pressure. We can run way simpler compressor wheels for this.
Yeah.
We're always only ever going to run a 2.5 to 1 pressure ratio. All we're ever going to do is run 20 or 25 pounds.
And that's where I see I can tune a car with almost no sensors. And when I see it go from 20 to 10 pounds per pound, 20 horsepower to 10 pounds per pound, I know it's at 2-to-1. I don't need to look at anything.
You don't have to put a sensor in it. You already did before.
Done. Yeah. And then what I thought was mirrored exactly when I started looking at data. And then I would see sometimes a larger turbine would do the exact same horsepower, but with 1-to-1 boost. So it's like a funny thing. And then people ask me like,
that goes back to the whole, like, sometimes that back pressure doesn't hurt you if you've got the right cam and cylinder head.
Doesn't matter at some point. Yeah. And then what you will see is like transients the same, a bunch of stuff's the same, and you spent way less on a turbo and didn't have to run a 5-inch downpipe if you're not using.
If you're not going to turn the boost up, it really is going to be fine to run a 7875.
And that's why I keep saying the 7875 is the most flexible, because I've done like 8883s, 8103s, and they're so close that the money spent versus the outcome, if you're not going to scrutinize over every detail of the engine, is simply not worth it.
Yeah. Well, that's why, building a 7275 and a 7875 was some of the first, items on my list, for what to add into my, my budget build category, So, and we do have a really nice 7875, a really nice 7275 right now to fill that.
I was going to say, quick, I'll ask you a question. Did you ever look at data? So say you have one of those turbine or compressor outlets that has fairly straight, nice flow versus all of those 90s. Have you ever looked at 60 pounds, is the intake air temperature wildly higher on the one that has so much?
No, it doesn't change the temperature. What it does, those restrictions on the outlet changes what shaft speed it takes to move the air through it.
Oh, so the shaft speed's through the roof, and that's dangerous.
Shaft speed goes through the roof. Yeah. So what you end up having, you put these compromises on the cover, you end up paying for it with shaft speed. Shaft speed. How do you buy shaft speed? You buy it with EMAP.
Interesting.
You pay for your shaft speed with drive pressure. That's how you get shaft speed. So doing this sort of thing drives your turbine pressure up, and it drives your shaft speed up.
A good one here, this would be interesting to know, because the whole math and flow aspect, and I just know what I know. But it says, how do you feel about wastegates mounted directly on, he says compressor versus downstream, but I know he means on the turbine versus pre-turbine in the piping.
I used to be really vocal about this until I realized, again, we're trying to run 15 pounds boost. Okay. So the fact that we're using so little of the turbo means that we get to have fouls.
Yes.
That we don't have to pay for.
That's what I say to people all the time. You can make a lot of mistakes and this thing will still work.
You get to go ahead and hit that easy button and put that wastegate on that turbine housing, And it doesn't get in your way at 15 pounds of boost.
So
now, if you're going to try to go take a 72, 75 and run 1,100 horsepower on it and a 2-liter 4-cylinder Honda or something like that, you wouldn't get away with that shit.
It's got to get dumped before it gets
fuck
there.
it up. Yeah, it would mess up what the turbine does. You would not be able to put enough power on the shaft. It would not work right, and you would not reach your goals.
Or it would
but the fact that your goal is so short, you're so close to your goal already, you know, that even doing that wrong with the turbine housing doesn't cause a problem. You know, the only thing you're trying to do is keep it to 5 PSI.
You limit air pressure.
So if it's a big ship, say it's a big ship, and it's got this big sail on it, and it's like, oh my gosh, we got to slow this boat down. Okay. You can either take the sail down or you can cut a big hole in it. Okay. Taking the sail down slows the boat down, but so does cutting a big hole in it. Okay. Yeah. And so people go, oh, I control boost. I never had a problem controlling boost like that. Of course you don't. You slow the boat down if you cut a big hole in the sail. Now, is that the best way to slow the boat down? No, because someday you're going to want the sail.
So here's an interesting question that I have. Do you find that in my application where I would put the turbine or the wastegate on the turbine, would I see a horsepower gain putting it pre-turbine?
You'll see a back pressure improvement.
Okay,
is what you'll see. May or may not show up as power depending on your cylinder head and cam.
Yeah. So back pressure will be lower dumping it before the turbine.
Yeah, properly.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know that either.
Also, by interrupting the volute and putting the wastegate on the side of it, you're introducing side loading to the turbine. So now the floating journal bearings, which are supposed to only hold the shaft centered, now have to deal with a side load
of the wastegate opening and closing.
The wastegate opening and closing. It'd be like putting a belt on the nose of a crankshaft for a blower and pulling it this way.
Pulling it one direction.
Yeah. So you're going to have wear, and you're going to have problems from that. Are you going to have it this summer on your way to go get ice cream? No.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
but motorsport, record breaking.
Yeah, motorsport stuff. No, you'd never do that. It's going to affect your turbine efficiency. It's going to affect your ability to put power on the shaft.
And then my other question is the flow change on doing that on a turbine. Does it fuck with the turbine, like the absolute
yes, flow? It would. Yeah, actually, you're going to reduce the flow. You're going to reduce the flow through the turbine. You're going to have wastegate flow that's great, but you're not going to have turbine flow, and that's why you're not having power on the shaft anymore. Because
that's why you're saying putting it pre-turbine is much more effective in most situations.
Much more effective, yes. From an academic perspective, yes. Does it make a difference at 5 pounds of boost or 10 pounds of boost?
Yeah,
you probably can't.
It's something for people to consider, which is like I love to give people is. For what you're doing, no. For what you want to do, maybe. For what you have a record-breaking car, it's the sum of all parts, is what I always say.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not mad like I used to be about when I see people do that. I used to be the guy, and you know, I still jump in when I see people doing aluminum downpipes. But I used to jump in when I saw people drilling with the hole saws on the turbine housing. Now I just think it's great. You know, I mean. It's a great way to make it fit in that engine compartment. It's a great way to go ahead and make 500 or 600 horsepower.
Because in my opinion, a lot of people can't visually understand where it should be and what size they need based off of engine size, turbine. It's a lot of stuff that's experience driven, and people will mislead you. Putting it on the turbine fixes 90% of that if you don't have a wild...
It does. It fixes 90% of it in the fact that it slowed the ship down.
Yep, exactly.
You got to realize that
it
now
just
you're
gets
in a
it done.
ship. It gets it done. We slowed the ship down, but now we're heading across the ocean in a ship with great big slash in the sail.
There's a lot of trade-offs, but for most people, it's not a thing. Here's a good one too. Blow-off valve at the throttle versus at the compressor outlet. And I would add to that, I've seen a lot of cars, especially like Coyote cars, they put the blow-off valve on an end tank or pre-mass air meter and other weird shit.
I don't think that is really a battle worth fighting.
As long as it gets the pressure off the compressor.
To argue for it being in one location or another, I really don't think that's a hill worth dying on. There's not enough of a difference there. You know, I would say if you wanted to protect the turbo the most, you might have it closer to the turbo. Okay.
My summary also
Yeah, but really letting that 100 pound a minute air column go somewhere,
Anywhere, yes.
anywhere, is really what you're trying to do. You're trying to let the dog out of the house before it pees on the floor.
Like I always
Just got to
say,
get it out of there.
I enjoy. I've always done T6, T4, like you showed, the half inch versus the quarter inch nearly. I'm
Mhm.
like, I would always say to people, because I'm a hammer, I'm like, I love to hear the air shooting out of the compressor inlet, backing up so much that it's sneezing out.
Then make sure you get this shaft.
Yeah, because I have this much mechanical sympathy, so I don't care, and I mostly don't have an issue, and I love hearing them back up. As much as I like hearing a large Borg Warner turbine slowly whistle up to like a jet airliner whistle, that's cool. So I don't really care about backing up an S480 at all.
No, you're not going to, and especially like I said, 15 pounds of boost, you're not doing anything to it that it can't handle.
Yeah. When you try to reverse that shaft at whatever, it doesn't care because
It
it's a
doesn't
half
reverse.
inch.
It keeps going the way it was going. It doesn't. The blades don't bend. The blades are thick.
I'd love to see, like, well, you've probably seen it, so that's how you answer that question. But I'd love to see turbo speed data log versus like me and
Oh,
my
now the blow off valve does a great job of keeping shaft speed up between
yes.
shifts. So
Well,
if you got a clutch, just forget everything we've just been talking about. Put a blow off valve on there so that your speed stays up.
yeah.
You got an automatic, throttle body's always staying open. Your shaft speed stays up anyway.
I'm glad you brought that
Okay.
up because 90% of what I do is turbo autos. But I've said the same thing. I had a turbo Civic with no blow off valve, and it would crush the transient between gears.
Yeah,
And I ended up
because the RPM goes from near max to
zero
near minimum.
almost. And
Yeah.
then it has to climb all the way back up. And
Yeah.
I actually put an eBay blow off valve that didn't leak and everything else that I had set up correctly. And it was night and day keeping the turbo spinning and
Yeah,
not
between
backing it
shifts.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes
So
a big
that's
difference.
something people should know also.
Mm-hmm. Hey, see if you can find another good question, and I'm going to step off for just a second, and I'll be right back. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gents, we went over twins versus single. Ball bearing versus cast versus machined, like center sections and whatnot are pretty good. Why are compound turbos full of magic sauce? We went over that a little bit. Top 3 movies we went over. Speed sensors for exhaust gas turbos. Here's another one, twins versus singles. What do you guys think we should have them go over next? Blade counts, effect of airflow versus certain pressure ratios. I mean, that's just a complicated one. Maybe he can go over. This is good. My wife asked, this is funny that it's her. What led you to manufacturing turbos and what was your first fun car? We should do that next, not just because it's my wife, but that's a fantastic question. I always like knowing where people came from, what influenced them. Obviously, he knows a lot and he sells turbos, but why? Why does he do it? So we'll do that next. When running back pressure issues, when would you go to a looser AR versus larger turbine? He did touch on that a little bit. Maybe we could have him elaborate. He was saying if the pressure ratio doesn't affect your overall horsepower, the smaller turbine will get you more power sooner if it doesn't matter up top, kind of thing. And I'm paraphrasing for him, but I think that's what I understand, and I think that's what he is at also. What AR is right for your combo? Similar thing, like if you wanted to light sooner, the smaller AR. If you want more top end power, choosing the larger AR is more intelligent. And then it's also a product of, I think, cubic inches and everything else. So, talk amongst yourselves. I'm becoming verklempt now.
Yeah, me too.
My wife asked 2 good questions, and I said not just because it's her, but because they're far and away from what we've been talking about. And I think it is a nice keynote to why you do what you do. And so the first is what led you to manufacturing turbos, and what was your first fun car that you think in your definition?
Okay, I'm gonna go with this. I'm gonna go with the fun car first because I did what every dad doesn't want their son to do when it's time to drive. I wouldn't drive what he wanted me to drive, and I insisted on buying something else, and worked and made my own money and bought it, even though he didn't want me to have it. It was a 66 Fairlane with a 390 and a C6 training, I think, and a 9-inch rear. And, I went through the whole how to put crossover headers underneath it. It's not a very wide thing. I beat myself up on working on that car. And it was a lot of fun, and I thought it was fast. Didn't turn out it was very fast at all. But that was my first fun car, and I insisted on having it first as my first car. I had to have that car, man. I just couldn't stand the idea of driving anything else. And my dad had this wonderful 75 Monte Carlo, baby blue 75 Monte Carlo. Do you know how long the doors are on those things?
Even longer than a third gen Camaro.
Yes, they are like a mile long.
I have backing cars onto the dyno that we have at the paving company. Third gen Camaros, there's posts, there's a staircase to the driver's side. Third gens will hit the back post.
Hit the post.
And every other car does not. But a third gen, I have to watch, like, depending on...
Be real careful.
I'm like, I'm going to ding the door on the very back 4x4 for the staircase.
And I'd buy that 75 Monte Carlo for $5,000 right now if I could find it. That's how neat I think a 75 Monte Carlo is today. But I couldn't stand the idea of driving it. I bought a 66 Fairlane instead, and I had a party with that. Sold it to a friend of mine. It was a great car. A lot of fun. Disc brakes all the way around. Manual steering. Talk about connection with your life and the road. It's all in your hands right there. It had the vent windows, had air conditioning. The kind of air conditioning it had was the vent windows you could turn forward.
50% of my Fairmonts had the quarter vent windows, and one of them was the pull tab, and you could turn it. And one of them was, I've never seen this before, a dial, and it had like a worm drive.
Really?
It had a dial.
I haven't seen that.
I was like, what? I've seen a lot of older cars, like people make fun of younger kids where they're like the left foot high beam trigger, where the dead pedal is. Yeah. People have no clue. I'm like, obviously I like to own older, crappier cars, and of course I've seen that, but I have never seen a vent window where you can spin a dial.
With a dial to adjust it?
Because if some of those wing windows are loose, they'll just swing around.
I never had that problem. Mine was really tight, and leaky, like everything else. Car, man.
I'm talking about 80s Fords, so some of them were like whoop whoop whoop.
Yeah, I unfortunately I had a Fairmont that I drove past for 2 years. It was red with a white vinyl top, and this was right when I was just starting to like understand what sloppy was. And I was like, I should stop and ask if I could buy that. I should stop and ask if I could buy that. And finally, by the time I was like, no, I'm sure I need to stop and ask, it was gone. It was just, and now it haunts me. So yeah, my first fun car is a 66 Ford Fairlane. And how did I get into deciding to manufacture turbos? I was an air-cooled Volkswagen geek, and the way you made an air-cooled Volkswagen go fast was put a turbo on it. You put a turbo, radiator turbo on it. You draw through carburetor, and you just drowned it in alcohol and ran 10-second air-cooled Volkswagens. And that's what I thought was the coolest thing in the world. And that got me interested in turbos, and that got me reading, all the books. Hugh McInnes's book, Corky Bell's book. If you don't know what I'm talking about, figure it out. Go read those books. Good stuff in there. And then the next thing I knew, I was a physics student, and I was able to get a job in the physics department machine shop, and we worked on telescope parts there, repairing telescopes and all the things they needed there. Those are little round things that go in a lathe. So I spent a few years doing that while I was studying physics. And then later on, it came back to serve me because I was able to get a job in a turbocharger machine shop that serviced and did Navy contracts for turbochargers in Houston while I was at the University of Houston working on mechanical engineering classes. And so that's what got me into working on turbos on a daily basis. And that's when I realized that that's just what I wanted to do, man. I didn't want to do anything else. I didn't want to go into oil. I didn't want to go into energy. I didn't want to go into any other kind of manufacturing. I just wanted to build turbochargers, wanted to build wicked ass turbochargers. That's what I wanted to do.
And just as like a frame of reference, what year was that you're like, I'm gonna make turbos?
That was 90. That was 96.
Okay, cool.
It was 1996.
So you've been doing that pretty much ever
And
since.
that's when I got a Mitsubishi distributorship, and I started buying pallets and pallets of the 16G turbos for the Eclipses and distribute them to all the shops in North America. And one thing led to another there, because we always chase power, right?
Yeah.
So first thing I started to realize is like, well, wait a minute, this will also fit on there, and this will also fit on there. And look what I just did. I just Legoed this shit together, And a guy I worked with, Juan Garza, he was like, "Oh, you are the doctor." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "No, you're like Dr. Frankenstein." I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You just mix all the parts up. You don't follow the book. You don't use the right parts. You're like Dr. Frankenstein. You just build a crazy whatever thing." And I'm like, "No, it's not like I just use crazy whatever parts. I'm using the parts that I want to do the special stuff that I'm trying to do."
That worked,
And next thing you know, man, all these 4G63s that we're building these hybrid turbochargers for, they started going a whole second faster. So we took cars that were going barely hitting 10s with a 20G on it and a turbocharger that fit in the same place of that and looked about the same. We can make an extra 150, 200 horsepower more.
huge.
And those turned into the Frankenstein series of turbochargers, Frankenstein 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then after that, I parlayed that into opening force performance and just being all on my own and just doing all my own stuff.
That guy, yeah, Force Fed Red apparently has been around motorsport a long time. He goes, and so Frankenstein turbos were created. So he knows all about them apparently.
It was a big thing. It was a big deal. It's a term that's used pretty widely now. And other people have latched onto it and used it, and I don't care, but that's how it all started. Building those Frankensteins. And then I was like, well, I don't want to buy a Mitsubishi compressor cover. I don't want to use that compressor wheel. I need a better one. And then that led into just manufacturing things. That just led into me making my own parts. Because I knew we could do better. And I had a really good friend in Tile. Tile has always been a really good business partner for us. And the motivation from the Tile end of things for excellence in manufacturing and the excellence in motorsports has always been a big influence on me. So, fortunately for me, that partnership has let me have some really, really nice top shelf parts for my turbochargers over the years, because nobody makes things as nice as Tile does.
Awesome. Well, I have some that I'm looking through here that I would like answered too. The difference when you would need a ball bearing versus bushing, and cast versus billet or machined. Turbine.
Okay, cast versus billet or machined is almost irrelevant when it comes to aerodynamics, but it probably has something to do with how fast you can spin them without breaking them. No,
doesn't matter.
Because whatever I can machine, whatever shape I can machine onto a blade, I could also cast it if I wanted a tool for it. So aerodynamically, I can do the same thing either way, almost without an exception.
So people talk about the weight of a cast versus a billet, that it's lighter, that it should spin up faster. Is there any merit?
If you pick a lighter billet one than a heavier cast one, yeah, but you could pick a light cast one and a heavy billet one too.
Interesting.
Okay. There's nothing about the manufacturing process of machining it out of a solid block that makes it inherently light. You could make a big old Russian tank style billet compressor wheel, and all these HD turbos have a big old Russian tank style thick blade compressor wheel on it. And and I'm not talking about just my stuff. I'm talking about all the stuff you use. I'm not going to say brands or anything, but this niche, this genre of turbo, this S400 sloppy genre of turbocharger, they're very durable. Okay, let me grab a blade. I'll show you what I'm talking about.
That's interesting, because I have always thought and said that a billet is simply faster because of lighter weight, but he brings a good retrospective there that the weight can be, a billet can be heavier than a cast.
Yeah, it really can. It really can. And like here's an example. There's a billet wheel, and the I don't know, it might be hard to tell, but the blades are thinner on this one than this one.
Yeah.
Okay. This wheel, the whole blade is milled at one time with the mill at this angle going like that. This wheel, it's the end of the mill going, so this blade can have a curl to it that this blade can't have, okay, because it's milled with the side of the end mill, and so the whole surface of this blade is a straight line. Everywhere on this blade, you could lay a straight line. There's no curvature to it. Now, what does that do? That gets in the way of how accurately the surface of that wheel could be the design surface of it. Okay, aerodynamically, the design surface for the wheel lives inside a computer, and then out here in the real world is where the wheel lives. And what we cut is not exactly what we designed. Okay, especially when you flank mill. So typically you don't see flank milled wheels.
Other than like 3D printing a blade, sometimes you can't specifically physically manufacture what you wanted to originally design.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes you can't manufacture exactly what you designed. Okay, and so sometimes billet lets you get closer to manufacturing what you designed than casting. So sometimes you get a performance advantage from billet, but at the same time, what if you're an unscrupulous machine shop operator and you just go, I'm going to make billet wheels as fastly and quickly as I can with no concern for the shape. Okay, great. Now all of a sudden I can have $30, KTS wheels from Malaysia, and I can order them to fit any turbo and replace any compressor wheel in the world, right? And it's just a little $30 replica of what was supposed to go in there.
The more I learn about motorsport and almost every facet of it, is that man, I just totally drew a blank. This is awful. But every simple question, if there's a simple answer, someone's probably wrong or doesn't understand. Because any decent simple question is like a can of worms, is basically what I wanted to summarize.
It's because really, when a lot of people ask their question, right? And they think they've posed a question.
It's goals.
But they haven't posed a question. They've said, what's better? Beans or carrots?
It's tough. And I always try to draw that line, and I think some people think I'm being a dick about it, to put it bluntly. But people will be like, what's better? And I'm like, what's better in your situation, or what's better overall for cost unlimited? What makes more airflow, or what is better drivable, or what is economically the best?
What's better for longevity? What's better for what?
It becomes this huge thing. And that's like, essentially, you think rocketing and space flight is complex, but it's literally the same thing. Like
turbocharging is the most complicated industry and the most complicated art I could have chose to go into. I don't know I don't know if nuclear engineering, I mean, probably medicine is more complicated than this, but I don't know what's more challenging than this. I'm on a daily basis, I'm challenged. And that's what keeps this exciting for me, is there's always something new to try to figure out. And sometimes, like, something goes wrong. I have a customer that, like, this isn't right, this didn't work right. And sometimes I piss them off because I spend so much time trying to figure out what their problem is. And they don't
understand the delta drop over the compressor piping and the intercooler.
It could be that. It could be a number of things, and I'm pissing them off because I just, I want to try to figure it out, and I want data logs, and I want to talk to this, and
they want to return a turbo they think is garbage.
Yeah, and they think I'm arguing with them over whether or not I'll take it back. I don't care about that. Can you let me figure it out, though? Because if what you said is true, I really want to figure out what happened. Yeah. But well, I don't have a log. I don't have this. I don't have that. It's like, well, it'd be really good if you did. Well, you just don't want to give me a refund. I don't care about damn turbo. I don't care about damn turbo. I'll give the money back to the turbo. That's not a problem. I want to know what happened.
Yeah.
One turbo this way or that way doesn't change my life at all.
Here's a good one. This is a good one I want to add to the billet versus cast. He says, billet is more structurally sound question, thus it can spin faster. And I would say...
Can be.
Yeah.
Can be. Doesn't have to be though. You could cut a really crappy billet wheel if you wanted to. Hey, you want to see the first? You want to see the first billet blade we ever tried to cut?
Oh, nice. So the machine crashed or something.
that was just experimenting with, like, we had never cut one before.
Yeah.
And we were like, hey, let's
hey, that's a billet wheel, kids.
Yeah. Well, you got to cut one wheel. We got to cut one blade before you can cut a wheel, right?
That's nice.
So you got to start somewhere.
That's awesome.
You know, is that one fancy?
No, you know? I appreciate like I always show people my failures more than my success, I believe.
That's not fancy. Okay, no, that's billet though.
The humility that you provide in showing that is what I like to see.
That's why I had it sitting right over here. I wanted you to see it.
You're like, this is my first thing, and it's garbage to most people, but this is our.
But it qualifies as billet,
it's
bro. It's
literally our first billet cut. So, and then there was someone that asked something earlier, and it just shot out in my head. They're like turbo sizing based off of fuel. And they said methanol, and I'll make an assumption, and we'll see what you say. And if I learn something, I've learned a lot so far, and I would say that for a methanol car, you would need more turbo or more turbine than you expect because there's more fuel and more exhaust byproduct, in my opinion, that's happening.
Methanol generates a lot of exhaust gas energy.
So if you have what you think is a good turbo and you swap to M1,
you swap to methanol, you might not have a big enough turbine section anymore.
Okay, so I at least know that.
You might wish you had a little bit. You might wish you had one size larger turbine, or you might wish you had one size larger turbine AR.
I've even seen it on E85 cars where you think a turbo is too large, but the 40% more fuel flow creates more exhaust gas, and you can light a bigger turbo than you would expect easier than a gasoline.
Which is counterintuitive because most people will also at the same time tell you that E85 has cooler EGTs. It's like, well, if E85 generates a cooler EGT, then it's got less energy. Why does it work better? Okay, so there's not universal truths like that because it's a multidimensional problem.
And then I say the same thing about in the intake. People say about the temperature exchange, but I'm like, well, I think the E85, I have personally built engines where the piston ring tolerance is the same, and on gasoline, you will knock a piston ring. You'll lift the ringland lower or upper, and on E, you can push it twice as hard and never hurt the piston or the ringland.
With the 85.
Yes, because I think it's the
I see the same thing, and it's
and
true
everything
because
else going on.
The chamber before the combustion, the chamber's a lot cooler.
The ring never gets as high.
So the average temperature of the piston is a lot cooler.
Yeah.
So the piston doesn't fit the bore as tightly. The rings aren't as tight in the bore either because they're not as hot.
When people have a goal in mind, and I'm like, what fuel? And they say E85, I say don't.
Now, you see this all the time with guys that switch from gasoline to E85, and all of a sudden they start having turbo smoking problems.
What's that?
Well, why would they? Okay, here's why. Because your rings and your piston and your cylinder and your rings, they all were sized and fit well to seal well on gasoline. You change over to E85, suddenly
the combustion
gets as hot. The
expansion
is a lot cooler. It never got as hot. It doesn't seal as much. Your blow by goes up, and what your catch can system and everything worked great for gasoline, not working great for E85. Suddenly your crankcase pressure is getting a little bit high, and you start wheezing a little oil out of your turbo.
What's funny about that is we used to say, like, if an engine was kind of looked tired and we would spray it, it would improve. So that
because you made it seal better.
Well, like we fixed it with nitrous, and people are like, you are morons. And I'm like,
no, but I did.
The baseline, we would baseline a car. We would always buy, before Cash for Clunkers ruined all the cool rear wheel drive old school V8 cars that we used to buy a car. Let me rant. We used to buy a car for $150 and then drive it on coal roads and ruin it and scrap it for $300 once a weekend. And we would spray them, and they would be tired. Like the old school Mercury Grand Marquis make like 120 horsepower 5-liter V8, and we would sauce it until it hurt, and then it would make more on subsequent dyno pulls on motor. because
Oh, wow.
it was like sealed up, or it burned
Yeah,
off
yeah, yeah.
awful things, or it had never had the carbon blown out of
You
it,
done
or
taught it a lesson.
yeah, like it's funny. It would pick up 20, 30 horsepower after
Mhm.
spraying aside. It would pick up on motor consecutively 5 pulls in a row. It would make more on motor after subjecting it to awful abuse on nitrous oxide. So,
Well, I'm not going to try to explain that one, but there's no doubt in the fact that it happens.
yes.
It does. It does.
Anyway, where were you? I've derailed.
Did I get derailed? I'm not sure.
Where were you? Oh, we talked
Uh,
about fuel. So yeah, we
yeah,
covered that for him. If it's you should let the person know if they're sizing a turbo or if you are sizing a setup. Obviously, alcohol-based fuels demand more
I I would
turbo.
probably like not worry about sizing differences exactly on gasoline versus the 85, but I would definitely consider sizing methanol or M1 or M5 with a little nitro in it. I would definitely consider that in my turbine housing selection. If I knew that the car was going to run on methanol, I would definitely consider that. Yes, I would.
Oh, here's a good one. Immediately just came up. Divided versus non-divided. What's your summary on why you should choose one or the other, or what makes a difference?
Uh, Again, we go back to like how many things can we do wrong and still get it right? We can do this wrong and still get it right. Also, this is included in that category of things we can do wrong and still get right. We can put a divided single turbo on a single open manifold, for example, and get great results. Okay. Um, does divided housings, what does it do for you? At engine speeds below about 3,000, 3,500 RPM, the pulse timing of a four cylinder can be timed such that it really does help transient response below 3,500, 4,000 RPM. Beyond that, in my opinion, it's pretty irrelevant whether you have a divided or not. Um, Generally speaking, if you have a divided housing and an open housing, and they're the same AR, the open version is going to flow about 20% more than the divided one of the same AR. And you can use that 20% correction factor to account for changing turbine housing. So, like, say, if you had an open 100 turbine housing and you wanted a bigger one, and the only one available was a divided 144, that is a bigger housing. Okay, because a divided 120 would be about equivalent to an open 100 in terms of choke flow and spool. So there's kind of a 20% correction factor there to go from open to divided. Does it really do much for spool? No, not really, in my opinion. No, and that's the opinion I've developed over my whole life, and that's how I feel about it. Just really doesn't change much.
So
Motorsports doesn't use divided housings. Okay, if you look at like top level like Le Mans or anybody that uses turbos for like 24-hour racing, those are generally not going to be divided housings.
oh, I didn't know that. And now,
Yeah,
before I forget, uh, one of the old ones that I think we were supposed to cover at some point was journal versus ball bearing
we can do
benefit.
that one. I can do that one.
And then another one, I'm going to just lay it out before I forget it. People are asking, are people coming after you about the EPA? Because I know a lot of my friends with shops are under fire or scared about
People are really
EPA
worried
stuff
right now. With the government can change kind of quickly, right?
because they're
And
just
as
flat attacking people that don't deserve it and
they
crushing
are
them.
flat, they are flat attacking people that don't deserve it a lot. And the nice thing about like the Happy Dragon series and the FP series is those are universal fit turbochargers, and those are not being made to fit on any emission controlled vehicle in any particular manner. So I'm not a part of that. I'm not a part of making turbos that go on cars that
Yeah,
disable
I would have
it,
assumed the same, that you're building aftermarket housings
universal
and bolt-ons.
turbochargers. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're not making like a Power Stroke or Subaru.
No, I don't want to do something like that where we're encouraging removal of emission controls
So
systems,
you're
and
staying far away from it,
I try to
from
stay as far
the
away from it as
yeah.
I can. Yeah.
not modifying emissions control. So did you
No,
say?
as a matter of fact, with my Camaro project, I mentioned it earlier of the 18 Camaro, the LTG 2-liter force turbo. That whole project, I'm going to be seeking a exemption order for that, and hopefully getting an exemption order for the turbo for that project. That whole project has not disabled any emission systems on that whole car. We took the car from, we added roughly about 100 horsepower to that car with all the catalytic converter and emission control system completely intact. Nothing changed about that whatsoever, not changing the emissions whatsoever. And we plan to have that get an EO for that. So, I mean, in the future, everybody needs to be really oriented about aligned with not violating EPA laws and making sure that they are taking their new products that they're making for new cars that are emission controlled and seeking exemption orders for their parts. It's going to be really important going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think some of that's shitty, but some of it is because people are specifically building things to fight EPA regulation. So they're kind of asking for it. Some people aren't. Some people are, especially with like the stupid sooty diesel trucks. Like, there's no reason to be belching.
You know, that's a shame that's so easy for people to get upset about because it's so in your face. You know,
Yeah, people are like, oh, these people walking on the sidewalk, blah.
Isn't
Like,
this hilarious? You know,
and then
well,
people are
maybe if
like,
you hadn't been such an asshat like that, you know, but
even if there's an argument where the emissions is much lower than a poorly running gasoline car, it doesn't matter. You're not spraying black all over somebody so publicly where anybody watching the news at
defensive.
night is like, oh my God, that's terrible.
Dude, that's almost an assault of some
You're
kind, you
doing
know?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, if someone does that, they're just a giant dickhead. It's not funny. It's like going up to kids and blowing tobacco smoke in their face, like, oh, you don't like
Yeah, or there's an
smoke.
old lady standing next to a puddle at the bus stop, and you
You
just go over to
splash
hit
her,
the
like,
puddle. Yeah, why would you do that?
like,
What do you need to do that for?
like I work for a hospital, and every single time I come in and out of an entrance, there's people smoking cigarettes at a hospital entrance.
It's crazy.
And some of them are the fucking cancer
Patients. They're the
entrance
patients.
for
Yeah.
cancer, for cancer therapy. There's people smoking out and they don't see the fucking problem. And I'm like, I wish someone would just punch you in the teeth.
Well, you know what? They're not going to unget cancer by stopping cigarettes today, are they?
But yeah, I don't know.
You know?
But I'm like, just the lack of concern for human beings is outrageous.
Well,
But
you know, what's the golden rule? You know, hey, I always said you could kind of condense the modern religion down into two primary goals. You know, be cool and don't be an asshole. You can do the whole Christianity, New Testament, and everything like that. Take the whole tenets of the whole thing and boil it down into be cool.
yeah, I mean, also there's three
Be
here.
cool the environment too, and do not disable emission systems on your cars, guys. You know, do not do it.
I like when people get upset about electric or Priuses, electric cars or hybrids, and they're like, rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, that's literally more allowance for you to have fun with petroleum-based vehicles, and it's less. It's more gasoline for you. I don't understand that. People, I think, from sloppy mechanics, people are like, oh, you must be so upset to see a Prius. No, I think it's awesome. And a Tesla, no, it's incredible.
What's wrong with it? I mean,
to have
it's
all
got a
of
place.
them.
It's
Who
got a
cares?
place. You know, I mean, if it's -2 degrees outside, maybe it doesn't have the same place that a gasoline engine does. But you know, but on a lot of days, an electric car is going to work fine for a lot of people.
It's
You know?
all whatever. It's your pizza preference. Who cares? I'm not gonna.
But
fight.
also, you know, I embrace the electric vehicle idea for motorsports. I mean, I don't do it really anymore. I still have a big collection, but I used to race RC cars, 10 scale cars,
Yeah.
you know, on track. And you used to have to get, you know, really fancy Italian, you know, 2-stroke motors and stuff like that. And I started getting whooped by guys that had
Brushless.
electric brushless and lipo setups. And
Goodbye.
one day they didn't have enough battery guys to make a battery class. So they put the battery guys in with us nitro guys. Guess what happened?
They wrecked you.
They killed us, dude. Yeah, they killed us. You know, can you have a fast, badass time with an electric vehicle? You damn right you can.
Yeah.
You know, and we need to embrace it going forward, because you know what's wrong with an 800 horsepower Corvette that's got another 400 horsepower of electric front drive units?
Yeah, I don't see the issue that people have with that stuff.
It's gonna be great, dude. Especially if you can tune it.
Yeah. Exactly. I can't wait till I've seen people might not know it, and might not have On Point Dyno and Speed Academy, I believe, have this guy named Sasha, and he has a Lotus that he has retrofitted a Tesla electric engine in the back, and he has placed batteries in it to make the weight distribution perfect. And
Similar.
I think he's been working with Motec for a control device for the Tesla engine that's aftermarket. No one says a lot about it because obviously Motec wants to probably charge 30 grand for it at some point, but it's incredible. And he even has like cruise control buttons that change the amount of regen. And he says you have to completely relearn how to drive the car, because if it was gasoline and you had an inclination of hearing the engine or knowing what gear you're in, if it'll spin out when you stab it. And he's like, this damn thing 180s when you don't think it will at all.
And that's why your tuning and your programming is so important.
Well, that's what they're learning
that's how you have to deal with it, is in the programming.
Yeah. So they're working on all that together, but it was funny to see people that have incredible driving ability looping this car in turns, because it has like a 750 foot-pounds
instantaneous
everywhere.
Torque. Yeah,
and there's no noise. There's no
indication. It doesn't need any RPM. It just gives you the torque.
Yeah, there's nothing happening, and they're like spin out.
I got a friend of mine, Ben Hockman, up in Illinois, that has been retrofitting an electric drive unit into an Evo, if I'm not mistaken. And I've kind of got my eye on him and seeing how that develops. But it all fits and it all mocks up and it's all going together. So I know it's going to happen. I think we need to embrace electric control systems, and if younger guys feel more comfortable with their computers and programming than they do with air ratchets, this is a great way to get into motorsports.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay. You don't need to go buy thousands of dollars worth of tools and tear things apart. And, maybe you can't carry a 6-liter engine into the garage by yourself, but maybe you understand how to program these speed controllers for these electric cars.
Yeah, absolutely. People would have
a whole nother direction to go.
I've built like quadcopters, racing ones, carbon fiber bodies.
Similar, parallels,
and the people that understand the soup to nuts on that would be the people that could completely retrofit a speed controller for almost completely useless Tesla motor. Otherwise, implement it very easily and do something. Yeah. That's what I keep waiting for, because people are like, Matt loves LS engines, and I'm like, guys, if I could get a Tesla engine and put it in a Fairmont front and back and
do
have a 4-wheel drive,
I'd do that too.
And people are like, whoa, and I'm like, yeah, that's the stuff I think about at night. Like, imagine having a 4-wheel drive stupid electric Fairmont that makes no noise, that makes like a combination 850 wheel on electric.
What does a 4-wheel rolling burnout look like?
Yeah, exactly. I'll turn the motors backwards and crab walk it.
Hell yeah, you will.
You ever see that where guys have done that, where they've built the twin engine cars and they put like both into reverse and
yeah, and 4-wheel steering, so they go and just pivot it around. Yeah.
They built like anyway, I'm not going to go into it, but I want to know.
We could go off the deep end with that.
I want to know. There's some other ones that came up in my summaries of watching the chat. Aluminum downpipe. What's your grievances?
I don't like the idea of an aluminum downpipe. Again, I'm a safety first Clyde. And I know turbos explode. I know people break this part off of a turbo.
So
and I
you
know
think
that
the weight limit is null versus the safety expectation?
Why don't you stop eating so many damn cheeseburgers and make yourself lighter? What do you think, you're going to save half a pound on a downpipe and that's going to like make you a winner?
I agree. The aluminum is overkill in my opinion for a downpipe.
It's not. I mean, if you're not even using like 8 feet of it.
No, they're all hood
Okay.
exit or
So
bumper.
I would, if people want to impress me with their aluminum downpipes, why don't they show me how it saved 45 pounds?
It doesn't. You're right.
Okay.
It's
So
not even.
I'm
It's
not
not even
impressed.
half the
And,
weight,
and
is
it
it?
doesn't help your safety. These people put these turbos up front. They put these high 90 and past,
It's like
90 and 120
2 feet,
degree
3 feet
bends.
long.
And it's aluminum. And guess what those are right next to? The steering tires.
Yeah. And I think aluminum moves more than metal. That's in my head. I think aluminum has more movement when it heats or cools
Well,
than
sure, it's
steel
good. Yeah,
does.
it does. It does that a lot, but I don't. That doesn't bother me. Your shit can move all over the place. I don't care about that. What I care about is if the turbo explodes, are the pieces going to come through that wall or not?
Yeah.
If you got a nice 30,000 wall stainless steel tube versus a 30,000 wall aluminum tube, and you lose one of these and it's traveling down the tube, and you got this nice 90-degree bend, honestly, I guess it's probably going to go through both of them. But it's going to go through the aluminum with a lot more buttery than it's going to go through the stainless steel one, man. The stainless steel has got a lot of yield and soak up, and it's going to consume a lot of that energy, and aluminum will not, bro.
A good one that I think we forgot. I can't remember if we answered this or not. Ball bearing versus journal. What's the
I want to talk
huge?
about that one. We didn't
Yep.
yet, okay, and I can hit this one really
I
well.
sidetracked you for sure.
It's fine. We'll do this one. I think this will probably be the crowning jewel then. Okay, so so here's the deal. Ball bearings. Ball bearings can run without pressurized oil film. Okay. A ball bearing can run for 5 minutes without any additional oil. A ball bearing turbo can run for 5 minutes with the oil that was in it 5 minutes ago. And it's fine. It's not even angry about it. Okay. The journal bearing turbocharger, the full name for that is floating journal bearing turbocharger. So it is to float like a ship has to float in the ocean. Okay. Well, what happens if the ship in the ocean goes over a volcano and the bubbles are coming up? Guess what happens? It's not displacing water anymore. It sinks. It goes right down to the bottom. Floating is a thing. Floating journal bearing is the name of the turbocharger. So you have to have this pressurized film of oil all the way around the journal bearings and between the thrust bearing and the collar
It
that
needs to
sits
be the
on that.
cushion everywhere in the
Yeah,
thrust
that
and
has
the
to be there.
360.
That has to be there, man. Okay, so the second, the tenth, the hundredth, the thousandth of a second that oil film is not there anymore, the surface speed is so high that it instantly torches. Your steel collar will turn blue. You'll damage these ramps, these little ramps on the bearing. I don't know if you can see them there,
Yeah, I
but
can
you'll
see
rip
them.
those right off of there, and then all of a sudden it's not doing its bearing job anymore, and it's just dying. You're like, wow, it just made a great pass.
It's
Everything
on the
was
way
fine.
down, right? No matter
And
what.
it doesn't fix itself. Okay, it just once it does this, it's just worse and worse and worse. The slope just keeps changing. Okay, so journal bearing turbos, floating journal bearing turbochargers, you cannot interrupt the pressurized oil supply to the turbocharger. You'll cook the bearing, just boom, you just cooked it. Okay, now,
Immediately.
yeah. Now, what do we know about going to get ice cream and doing burnouts? Do we pull 4Gs?
No,
No,
yeah.
no, we don't.
Motorsports, again,
Okay,
motorsports grade is totally different.
okay, we don't pull 2Gs even. We don't even pull 1G forward, probably. Okay, so what is the chances that our oil pickup in our pan is going to suck some air? Almost
Nothing.
none. Okay. Now let's go talk about a GTR. Let's go
Yeah.
talk about a 2200 horsepower GTR that's going to launch.
Yeah.
It does have multiple G's going forward. So if a GTR did that, any kind of car, if it launched with like 2 G's of forward acceleration, all the oil's in the back, the pickup is uncovered, and there's some foam in the oil for that period. For that first 60 feet, if you were going to data log oil pressure at the outlet of the pump, you're going to see high frequency disturbances in that oil pressure line as the foam goes past.
And that could easily wipe a journal.
The foam is going to just, yeah. By the time you get 120 feet down this track.
Especially when you're anti-lagging 40 pounds.
Yes. You have already got it fully on pipe.
100,000 RPM plus easily.
Yeah. And now you just go, hey, you know what? I'm going to see what happens when I take the oil pressure away for half a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just bought another turbo is what you did.
Huh.
You just bought another turbo is what you did.
And then
So
also,
what ball bearing does that all day long, no problem. Hey,
so
let's put some oil in it. Let's do the whole 6-second pass, and then we'll put oil in it again. Everything's
interesting.
fine.
So the longevity and abuse and oil slosh and all of that is.
Yeah, that's the big kicker for journal burn versus
Now,
ball.
is there a benefit to spool or transient with ball bearing at all?
People like to tell you that there is, man, but you know, they're also at the same time they're hard pressed to like show you the data logs.
Exactly, yeah. So I would say I like how you started with the longevity and repeatability and robustness.
To me, that's the motivation.
Yeah, because people are like ball bearing or they have videos where they shut the turbo off, shut the car off, and it spins for like 5 minutes. But that's what you're talking about. It retains that lubricity and it has that low friction coefficient.
That doesn't depend on that oil film.
But the back pressure versus fill versus intercooler versus engine size doesn't fucking matter that it spins for 7 minutes when you key off. It's a selling point.
It's a longevity selling point.
Yeah. People are like, watch this spin forever. It doesn't fucking matter.
No, but if you're the guy that's like, you know what, I want to buy this turbo because it's the cool turbo this season and it's on sale, and then next season I'm going to buy that cool turbo. It's, you know, so why would you want to? Why, if you're going to just like try things and experiment with stuff and do all this, why would you want to spend an extra $1,000 or $2,000 every time you experiment?
I'd say it's at least 40-30% more for a dual ball bearing.
It is at least, yes.
So almost
if you compare a 72 millimeter Zona Rotor turbocharger against a 72 millimeter like FP or Happy Dragon turbocharger, that it's the pricing is different by a factor of 2 or 3.
All right. Well, I have another. I like hearing all of my suspicions where I want to call people out and I think something's bullshit are true. Anyway. What turbo makes the most whistle? This is important. People want to know this. They don't care about overall horsepower, response, cost. They want to be the most obnoxious turbo sound, which I can identify with. Making turbo sounds is cool. I know that people specifically specialize in sending out your compressor and getting it modified for. Are you familiar with is it the T51R mod? It's like one of the loudest compressor housing turbos ever.
Yeah. And if you want to save your money and not spend your money on that, just go up to your turbo with a little triangular file, and you just file a little notch on 2 blades that are opposite of each other.
2 of them?
Make the same. Yeah, well, you want to balance it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So if it's 8 blades, you can do 4 of the 8.
Yeah. Just go put a little freaking notch on every other blade.
Now, what kind of file are you saying? A uniform, like a little donut in the. And is it closer to the shaft makes more noise or farther out?
Farther out will make more noise.
Wow. So yeah, I think I've seen where they just clip the compressor wheel. They put little circles and away from the housing, and it just whistles.
You're making me really mad right now.
Whistles like a son of a bitch.
You're getting me angry.
I'm making boomer comments right now. I just want my turbo to make noises. Anyway.
Why don't you go back to talking about welding turbine wastegates onto the side of turbine housings, man?
Triggered.
This is in the same category.
The word is triggered.
You get my blood pressure.
It's like when Pete Nichols, the guy that owns Hughes Performance, keeps posting his carbureted car, and I'm like, bro. Oh, this makes me. I just tell him outright. I'm like,
you're making me mad, dude.
You're making me mad. I don't like seeing it. He's like, I post it because it makes you mad, and I'm like, it's making me mad. For sure. Anyway,
they're loud with no filter on them. You know, that's the best way to do it. But you know, for the most part, the covers are made to work properly. And taking the cover and cutting everything above the surge slot out, and then putting another insert in that is the wrong diameter and creates extra gap around it so that it's louder. Why don't you? Again, just drill some freaking holes in the damn turbine housing, cut a big hole in your sail, and shoot yourself in the pecker while you're at it,
dude. I appreciate the honesty and the line in the sand. I do the same thing. I'm like, I don't care what you guys think. I think it's fucking useless. And I'll say what I think. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I get to think what I want too, right? Everybody
exactly.
does, right?
So who cares? I'll say what I want. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you hate me. I don't care what I have to say.
Yeah, you know,
This is
some people will. So
yeah, and that's fine. They can be mad and I'll laugh. That's why I make my memes and everybody is mad and I just make another one and don't even look at their comments and they don't.
yeah, but hey, you know, we're not talking to them right now, are we?
No. This is a good one. What's the most exotic turbo you have ever built? One off or series of turbos that is the most exotic or strange or low production?
I'll tell you, right now we're making some McLaren 720p turbochargers that are pretty wicked.
Ah,
You know, and you know, of course, you know, everybody that buys one of those doesn't really even inspect it or put plates on it, so we don't have to worry about EPA there because these are for off-road use in Mexico.
yes, of
Only.
course.
You know, but those are going to be beautiful, man. That's I've got some Zona Rotor UHF equipped cartridges for that, and in OEM housings, a 100% direct fit, perfect complement to the 720. That is something I'm really excited about right now.
Are those already out? My buddy Arnie.
No, they're not out. I'm making them right now.
Nice.
I'm making the parts right now.
My buddy Arnie Toman owns Cannonball Garage, and a lot of his, like 50% of his workflow seems like 720Ss. And
These the flow rating on these will allow supporting up to 1,200 wheel horsepower.
yeah, because they have some.
So this should be the largest turbos you would need for a 720 because the crankshaft and block assembly is not going to go past that anyway.
He was saying they have a package that makes 1,100 wheel, and that's stock engine. I was like, that's incredible. But
that is incredible.
But yeah, like yours might spool better or whatever else, or make more horsepower per pound, etc.
If there's someone making 1,100 on the factory turbochargers,
no, they're not factory turbo. No way.
They're gonna jizz themselves when they get these
because it's gonna be 2,200 horsepower in their opinion. I understand.
Yeah, we'll break motors is what we're gonna do.
So that's cool. So McLaren 720S is a decent vehicle to be exotic.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you my most disappointing exotic is how's that? Is that interesting? My most disappointing exotic
absolutely.
is the Bugatti.
A Bugatti?
Yeah. It has 4 of the cheapest little TD04 Mitsubishi rusting iron housing turbochargers I've ever seen.
I thought it had 4 KO3s.
It has 4 TD04 Mitsubishis.
Similar,
maybe like, different year models have different. I don't know. I'm not going to claim to be the Bugatti expert.
I just laughed and I was like,
6 years ago when I was working on that, they were Mitsubishis. So
I was like, I bet, because all Volkswagens have KO3s. I'm like, I bet it has 4 KO3s. And is that similar? I don't know Mitsubishi.
A KO3 turbos. And a TD04 are similar. Yeah, yeah.
They are so it basically has 4 KO3s.
Yeah. But,
that's hilarious.
But the fact that it's like what was the guys that metal print everything?
Koenigsegg.
Okay, so they were all the rage because they were like Inconel printing their turbine housings
absolutely.
And manifolds, and they had all this super alloy 3D mental printed stuff, and then they had aftermarket turbos in there with iron bearing housings that were rusting and dripping on all the rusting drip marks on all the printed Inconel stuff. Like, why would you guys do that?
That's funny. Like that's my aspect where someone would show me an incredible build and I'd be like, why are your valve cover gaskets leaking so bad? And people are like, why are you a jerk off? And I'm like, why are your valve covers leaking?
I don't know. Bad? You're the one with the leaking valve covers.
That's pretty simple. That's like 1991
You're the one with the rusting
Honda
turbos,
shit.
Mr. Bugatti guy.
Yeah, like why you got an Inconel printed turbo if your fucking valve covers leak so bad into your coil pack that misfires that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I love pointing out shit.
You can't be everywhere all the time, Matt.
Yeah. Here's a good one. This I think is good. We didn't cover this yet. It says
let's cover 1 or 2 more things, man. I'm I'm getting long in the day right now.
You let me know, and then we'll quit
I
whenever.
just let you know just now.
I will go till 3 because I have no limit on my
I haven't been
awake
watching.
time.
Are people watching along? Is there much going on here?
There's 260 people watching still right now.
Okay. Okay.
But where do you run oil lines? Where can you start? Where should you finish? Line size reducer? No
Okay, I
reducer.
saw that question, and the golden nugget in that question is that if you're ever running twins, you've got to have symmetry in your lines, or you're going to bias your flow to one of the turbochargers. So you can start on the side of the block where everybody always likes to start, taking the oil at the little regulator thing on the driver's side. You know, that little box there. I don't know what it's called. And run one line up to wherever you want to. And then, but when you split it and tee it to the other two turbos, those two split lengths have to be the same number of inches on each side. Or you're going to favor flow through one turbocharger. You'll have one turbocharger that gets more of the flow, oil flow. Symmetry is really important with your intercooler pipes and your wastegate priority. When you attach your wastegates to your headers for a twin setup, you need to focus on having equal priority for both wastegates. You don't put one at a 90-degree angle and another at a 120-degree angle to the pipe. You're going to end up with error in RPM on turbos from side to side doing that. Also, so my point about oil lines is if there's twins, symmetry, and also if there's twins, we need symmetry in wastegate priority and how we attach the wastegates to the collectors too.
Here's a good one if you can quickly summarize. Just for curiosity's sake, what's the largest turbo you've built or sold, and what's the smallest turbo you've built and sold?
Smallest one is would be a Mitsubishi TDO 15, TDO 2 or TDO 15. This is a really tiny little turbocharger. I mean, you can cover the compressor wheel up with a nickel. Okay. And
That's small.
these are made for the 600cc 3-cylinder cars that are really popular in Japan. I think they call them K-car.
Yes,
and,
I know all about it.
So there's a very tiny turbo for that. And I like to keep a couple of those around just for guys that want to like turbo a go-kart or turbo a dirt bike or turbo a Banshee or turbo, some random small displacement, not multiple, maybe 2 or 3 cylinder engine. Those are really handy for that. I like those. And they're really easy. They come with an internal wastegate in them. They're not that costly, maybe $500. So they're fun. They spin really, really fast because they're so tiny. I mean, I want to say that when I looked it up, they were going over 250,000 RPM at full flow.
200,
yeah.
Quarter million.
The smaller they get, the faster they spin. Okay.
Super fast.
Yeah. And then the biggest would probably be the TV94s. Okay. Really big. TV94 is an industrial size turbocharger for really heavy equipment. And a guy I know named Bob Norwood runs some TV94 stuff on some of his drag cars, and I've worked on those for him a few times. Just once. But that was a really huge turbo. I mean, talk about a turbo that probably weighs like 85 or 90 pounds. The turbocharger is really massive. I mean, turbine housing like that big around. I'm not even sure what he runs them on, but really big turbo. TV94 Garrett turbocharger. No, it's a little bit. It's kind of along the size of a GT55, but older turbo prior to the GT55s.
My wife sucked up.
Now, years ago, I would work on ABB, Brown Bavary, and those are they have axial flow turbines and centrifugal compressors, and the compressors on those are about this big around, and they got a bottom part and a top part. They got multiple part compressor wheels. So you change the size of the compressor wheel by just changing the top part of the wheel, and the bottom part of the wheel stays the same. And this is what you use like in tugboats and stuff. So on the Gulf Coast for shrimp boats and tugboats and stuff in the Gulf Coast, it was kind of a common thing. And I used to work on those sometimes down in Houston before I started Force Performance.
Wild.
ABB turbos.
My
Real
wife
big.
sucked up a giant spider apparently and threw the vacuum into my office and said, "You deal with him." Just wanted to share that. I'm like, "Say hello," and she's like, "Matt, just threw the vacuum in here."
No, you're vacuum now.
Here you go. You deal with that. She just texted me a bunch of stuff like, "Nope, not doing it. Nope, nope, nope."
Well, spiders are spiders. You know, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. How you doing? You want one or two more, or what?
I think I'm about finished, man. I think I've about had it.
Okay, no problem. I mean, we've been.
Man, those are some great questions, and I love visiting, and be happy to come back and do it some other time.
We're already 3.5 hours in.
It went longer than I thought. So yeah, this is 3 hours, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of talking, man. It's a lot of talking.
Yeah, so thank you, and it'll be awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I learned a lot. Some of the preconceived notions I had were shattered, so it's nice to hear.
Well, and don't forget, you guys, I don't just talk about turbos, I sell them too. So you can go to my website and see what kind of cool stuff I got.
Ah, yes. If you guys want to buy turbos, Robert sells them.
I do also sell them too. And not only do I sell them, but if you got a problem, I want to help you figure out what it is. And if you blow something up, I want to fix it for you. So, I mean, so not only do we just sell turbochargers, but like a staff of people here that we service them, problem solve. I'll review data logs. I don't mind spending some time helping you figure out what's going wrong.
And that's the price versus support thing we always try to explain to people. There's cheaper ways to do it, and you can be the person that does it. And the same we say with people that want to buy Holly for the cheapest price. If you buy it from a dealer, they will support you. They will give you bass tunes. They will give you a border. Like they will help you.
You buy a Holly from the right guy. You get to call a guy up and go, "Hey, now how does this traction control menu work?"
Yeah. It's overlooked. And again, like we talk about bad customers, it's 100% true.
You do have to uncustomer people sometimes.
You have to fire customers. Absolutely.
You do have to fire customers sometimes. Yeah.
All right. People are saying
not
thanks.
Very happy to do it, but sometimes it does have to happen.
People are saying thanks, Matt and Bob, blah, blah, blah. Not to,
Well, thank you very much. I've had a bunch of fun, man. I didn't think I was going to talk this long. I didn't think there was this much to say about it.
No, yeah, it's surprising how you can go 4 hours giving people information, and how grateful they are is always rewarding.
Well, I love answering questions, and I love helping people understand it. You know, if I could have made money being a teacher, I would have taught physics. You know, but I just didn't. There was no way to make money being a teacher that I could tell. So.
All right, well, that'll conclude this for the night. I hope everybody had fun, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you very much. Boost on, y'all.
Yeah, bye.